I told you this the other week. Art is not subjective. That's a liberal hoax.
You know, it is either a Stanley Kubrick movie or it's not good.
It's true. It's true.
That's it. Well, welcome to Split Take Podcast. I am your co-host, Jacob.
I am Chandler.
And we're back for another week of drinking and movie talking and
do you have alcohol today?
Fun. I don't.
Oh.
But I am drinking water.
It's true. We do drink every day.
Yes, I was gonna pick up some beer on my way home to drink, but I did not. So, not today. Maybe next episode. But today we have a very important episode. It's going to be jammed packed with everything possible.
Important episode.
It is. We're going to be talking today about two movies. We're going to be talking about Nomadland, which is a 2020 movie, just won the Golden Globe for Best Dramatic Picture. And we're going to be talking about that with our friend Nick, who has been on the podcast before. He reviewed, he was on the Defy Bloods episode and the Phantom Thread episode. And college buddy. He is now an editor trying to make a living in LA. And we'll check in with him in 10 minutes or so. And then our friend Brenton will be coming on after Nick. Brenton has been on the podcast once before. I feel like it's twice, but I can only...
What was it?
I can only remember
short films.
Specifically. It was episode 20, which is short films and a matter of life and death, which is very interesting because we have another Powell and Pressburger film that we will probably be mentioning today.
Yes.
But we'll probably mention that before he gets on. Anyway, so he'll be on to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly, which needs no introduction, and that'll be after Nomadland. But first, there are some follow-up things I would like to mention. Just as I'm editing the podcast, I mentioned this to Chandler the other day. I found it very funny. I was editing the
Full Metal Alchemist
Brotherhood episode, and I start that episode off by saying, "How was your Thanksgiving, Chandler?" And that just tells you
March
how far
at
back
the time of recording, just for the record.
And I've made good progress on that episode. Like, I think I'm getting faster at editing again. So fingers crossed. But every time I say that, nothing actually changes. In that episode, we talk about quite a bit that I just want to make a quick mention of. In that episode, I talked about the Coker trilogy box set. We were talking about the Vor trilogy, and I made the claim that the Coker trilogy is the best designed box set. And I'm going to stand by that statement. And I don't know why I didn't explain this last time, so I need to correct this mistake because I just skipped over the whole point. Is I talked about how, like, as you open it up and I'm showing Chandler, it reveals there's like windows and it reveals further things in. The whole point of that is that it's thematically relevant because the first film, Where's the Friend's House, is built upon by the other two. And so it's like creating new views of that one as you are putting more filters over the original film. Because the first film is just an actual narrative film. The second film is a meta-textual narrative. And then the third film is just like a making of narrative film. It's a very interesting trilogy. But the actual cover design is emblematic of the kind of Russian nesting doll structure of the entire trilogy. So needed to make the argument for that a little bit better.
I was waiting for that. I was curious. I was very curious.
Good. This is a mention for Chandler because I've been recommending the Star Trek The Wrath of Khan for quite some time. And we both follow someone called Muscala on Letterboxd.
And he just
watched it and gave it a very good rating. So here's a shout out to you. And he liked my review of Wrath of Khan today. So we're Wrath of Khan fans.
Get him on the podcast. We'll talk about the Wrath of Khan.
This is just me further promoting that. Mostly to Chandler, but if you, dear audience member, haven't seen it, it's a good time.
Jacob's the biggest Star Trek fan I know, so that's high praise coming from him.
I'm such a big Star Trek fan, I don't watch it.
It looks like fun. I don't have the time.
And then my final little follow up here is from last episode. We discussed Jiro Dreams of Sushi. And I unfortunately also forgot to mention the TV show Chef's Table, which was created by David Gleb, who was the director of Jiro's Dreams of Sushi. And he has done an amazing job at producing that series and getting a bunch of new directors and telling. Essentially, it's just a bunch of 45-minute episodes telling chefs' stories. Different,
neat.
like various Michelin-starred, world-renowned chefs. And each one is more of a like character study than it is about the food, but it is also about the food. And there's the trademarked food montages, which you have to, something that is in the lineage of Jiro Dreams of Sushi, you would expect a food montage. So highly recommend that series. I am now done with our follow-up. Chandler, what have you been watching?
I always need to check. Oh, I'm signed into the wrong Letterboxd account.
Is it time to come forward about that
no.
yet? Or
no.
Okay. That'll be our little secret.
One thing I watched, I'll just go through the big ones because I watched a lot of stuff. I watched Steven Soderbergh's Sex, Lies, and Videotape, which is a movie I've had for a while. I enjoy Steven Soderbergh. I think he's a very interesting filmmaker with a giant array of movies. And I've owned this for a while because it's a very interesting looking Criterion. It's like a digipack, but it's like half the size of a regular digipack, and it comes in like a plastic sleeve. So it slits into the sleeve.
Like, it's super thin, isn't it?
Super thin.
Yes.
I kind of love the way this is assembled because I love the quality of a digipack, but I always get afraid that the digipack's going to get messed up,
like frayed and kind of pulled apart.
But this prevents that. The downside is it's a bitch to get back in the sleeve. So not wanting to put it
sleeves.
Not wanting to put it back in the sleeve, I watched all the special features, but it's a very, very good movie. It is a movie. It's essentially like, it's kind of like an erotic thriller, but it's an erotic thriller that does not show any nudity, which I thought was interesting for a movie with the first word literally being sex. James Spader's in it. He's very young. Good old Robert California. It's a very, very solid directorial debut. I also watched Cool Hand Luke. That was sick.
Which I also recently watched for the first time.
Oh, you watched it for the first time. For some reason, I thought you had seen it before.
I know. We had this discussion. You had this misconception on Monday.
Like literally,
I tried to clear it up, but
yes,
failed.
I was in the middle of a war. All right, Jacob. I was warring at the time.
The Japanese-English war of
Russian. Well, you're right. I had two wars that night.
I thought it was the earlier war.
It might have been.
We're talking. This is Civ discussion. This is neither here nor there.
Yes.
So yeah.
But Cool Hand Luke is pretty great. I was a big fan of Cool Hand Luke.
It's kind of a low key movie.
Very low key movie. I went into this because I know a few people that have seen it, and their complaint was nothing happens. Which, I watched it and I'm like, that's not really that true.
Which is, it's true if all you care about are plot, like MacGuffin-driven plots, or gotta go here, gotta get the thing. No.
Yeah. This is, I don't know, have you seen The Great Escape?
I have seen The Great Escape quite a few times.
Really?
Yeah, it's been a while, but I have.
Do you have the Criterion?
I do not, no.
It's a pretty good
It's
one.
in English, so I kind of tend to not prioritize English movies that are easy to find.
That's fair. This is the movie I kind of wish The Great Escape was. Because The Great Escape, I think, is fine, but it's kind of a giant mess. At least from a script standpoint. This one is kind of a mess at points. One part is... But that's the thing. That's the difference, is that in the messy parts of The Great Escape, I'm just left wondering, what is happening right now? What are we doing? But in Cool Hand Luke
is like a fun hangout movie in a Nazi prison.
Yes.
Yes. You can tell the tonal disjointedness of that just by Cool Hand Luke is much more kind of contained and the themes and the tone is very steady and
Yeah.
tight.
It's very character driven. But yeah, the messier parts of Cool Hand Luke, like one thing I thought was dumb, but I liked. The difference being is that when The Great Escape gets messy, I'm just frustrated. When Cool Hand Luke gets messy, I'm like, okay, but it's still very fun. For example, the egg eating contest, which comes out of nowhere, but it's fun.
It is, yeah.
He eats 50 eggs. It's a fun time. And yeah, I think God, Paul Newman is just so good in this movie. He again, talking about this is what I wanted from The Great Escape. Steve McQueen in The Great Escape is like that badass, good-looking dude who can get by just on his cinematic power, his inherent charm. Paul Newman has that. Yeah. Paul Newman has that, but he's also a very good actor.
Yes.
Like his banjo playing scene when he's crying and playing a banjo.
That's great.
I thought that was incredible. So, overall, very good movie. I was surprised to learn that there was an Oscar winner in this movie, but it was not Paul Newman. It was the big guy.
The sheriff, the captain?
No, the prison guard, the one he fights and then he eventually escapes with.
Oh, him.
Yeah, he got an Oscar for that role. Which, you know, it's a good role. But Paul Newman was so goddamn good in this. I don't remember who Paul Newman lost to, but I remember it being pretty deserved.
Well, probably. Yeah, Cool Hand Luke, pretty great movie. As of right now, March 2021, it's on Netflix, so it's pretty easy to watch, which is why I watched it, finally, after a great many years, because I had known there's the famous line, what we have here is failure to communicate. And that is a very famous line.
Yeah. Just said by a man. I always thought it was a woman. It is indeed a man.
Even if you don't know it's from Cool Hand Luke, you probably, if you are vaguely aware of movies, you might have heard that line before. And
how inspired do you... Okay, so there's the one bad guy who is the prison guard with the glasses.
Right.
How inspired... how much do you think that inspired the bad guy in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
Yes. It has been so long since I've seen Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? That is a mistake on my part. But yeah, probably. Probably.
They're very similar looking.
At the very least, it might be one of those things where the Coen brothers watched Cool Hand Luke a long time ago and they kept like, sunglasses, that's a good villain thing. And then they kind of unconsciously planted that into Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
I'll get to one more movie before we have a joint movie. I watched this last night. I don't know if you checked up with my letterbox today.
I usually do.
But I watched a movie last night that has gone straight to my third best watch, best first watch of the year. That was Michael Mann's Thief.
Yes, I saw you had 5 stars, which I thought was interesting because we've checked in intermittently about Michael Mann and his films and how you like him as a director, but don't necessarily like a lot of his movies. So I was very surprised to see a 5-star rating from you.
Yes.
On this.
I've seen up to this point, I've seen Manhunter, which was okay. Heat, which I think is one of the most overrated movies of all time. And what's the last one? I've seen Collateral, and that's pretty good too. This one was so good that it made me want to watch Heat again. Because maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong about Heat. But this is just it's just a 2-hour movie of James Caan playing a safecracker who's trying to get enough money to retire. It's a really simple setup. It's a story that's been done a bunch of times before. It's hard to gauge how influential this story was into that general story archetype, because this was 1981 or 2. So maybe it hadn't been explored as much at the time, but there's a lot of great nuances to the story.
Question. Is it more focusing on like him as a character, or does it have a lot of like crime, like safe cracking scenes? Or
it's more about him as a character.
Okay.
I will say this. There are 2 safe cracking scenes. Only 2. The intro one and the one at the end. The rest of the movie is he has this very weird, but this is what I mean when there's subtle nuances to the story that makes it better than the typical stories of this genre. He was a man who went to jail for stealing $20 at the age of, or he's okay. He went to jail at the age of 20 for stealing $40. This prison sentence was 2 years. In that prison, he had a bunch of problems with a bunch of guys who were trying to take advantage of him, fight him, whatever. He had a rough time in the prison, so he roughs up a few people. He gets 8 more years in prison because one of them dies. He gets a manslaughter charge. So he spends the age of 20 to 31 in prison. He gets out of prison at age 31, and the only thing he knows is safe cracking. So what he wants to do is he wants to just work really hard, really quickly to rob a bunch of safes and get enough money to retire, get a wife, a house, and a kid. That stuff that he feels that he should have been getting in his 20s. So it's a lot of James Caan being kind of an asshole. He's a battering ram of a human being. He speed runs every racial slur this side of the Atlantic. But the style is just so good. This is what I love about the other movies, but I don't like the story. The style and the story are way better. And I honestly think the first scene, the first heist, is available on the Criterion channel in HD. I recommend anyone watch that because I think that specific scene, it's just him cracking the safe. He has a giant drill, and it's a lot of like really neat little insert shots of like the minutia of breaking into the safe, where you put in the drill, how it drills in, little like insane close-ups of the inner tumblers of the locks and how he like breaks through them. It's an amazing scene. I've seen it like 30 times before I even watched the movie. I recommend it. Thief is great. 5 out of 5.
Huh. Well, I will certainly check it out.
And then the last movie that I saw that you saw was Black Narcissus.
Black Narcissus, which
Black
we both
Narcissus.
got for the Criterion sale.
No, I didn't.
No, you didn't get it?
I just
that's
watched
right.
the Criterion channel.
I kind of assumed since it doesn't matter. What'd you think of Black? I've seen it before. What did you think of it?
I really, really liked it.
I too really, really like it. Even though I think it is the most disappointing Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger masterpiece.
Masterpiece?
Yes. So like there is The Red Shoes, Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, A Matter of Life and Death, and Black Narcissus. And these are like the big four of Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger. And I would say Black Narcissus is the most problematic of those. And the one that I would like to be on the same level as the rest of them, but is still excellent. Leagues above a lot of other stuff coming out at the same time. But yes, I can get into that. But I'm curious to hear more.
I definitely like this more than A Matter of Life and Death. But it's definitely under The Red Shoes, and it's far below Colonel Blimp. But yes, I do agree it's the most problematic. Lots of Indian people played by English people. I give it a pass because it's the 40s.
Yes. Part of it was, I don't know if you looked any into the production at all, but Michael Powell said to himself, "I'm not going to be lugging Technicolor cameras up the Himalayas, so we're going to film the entirety of a film that is set in India, except for like 2 flashback scenes. We're just going to do it in England. What could go wrong? It'll be fine." And which, this is par for the course for the Archers. That, because I mean, if you've seen Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, it's all fake. I mean, they rarely film on location. And obviously, I think in our review of that film, we talked about the World War I battle scene, battlefield, awesome, which is just a painted backdrop, and that is exactly what Black Narcissus does. And I think if I were to give it a single credit above Colonel Blimp, which is saying something because Colonel Blimp is amazing, it's that Black Narcissus has most certainly the better production design. It is breathtaking how this whole film comes together. None of it was shot on location in India. Some of it was shot in a garden in England, but most of it was in a studio.
I didn't know that. I thought some of it was. I definitely knew obviously the clifftop set. It's a matte painting, stuff like that. But I don't know. For some reason, I guess I just thought the actual temple itself was filmed at least in an India-looking location.
Yeah, it's an amazing feat of production design. The whole film it's like a film of production design, a unit of production design, which is It's pretty cool. You don't get many of those.
It's a surprisingly tense, suspenseful movie, especially towards the end. And it's one of those movies that feels very literary to me, because where obviously the plot is easy to follow.
It's also
easy to understand what's happening. Okay, that explains a lot. It's the plot is very easy to follow. It's very straightforward. But the whole time I'm just like thinking, watching this, going, this probably there's metaphors here. There's something else here. I can't put two and two together right now, but it made me want to revisit it. Especially that the character who goes crazy. Got a lot of Heart of Darkness vibes from this whole movie.
The thing that I wouldn't say I don't like, because that would be erroneous. It's that I think the film needs another 15 minutes. Not because anything is necessarily missing or anything is bad, but more so that what is there, I think, needs expanding on theme-wise.
Yeah.
And there is more to be said, and I would very much enjoy to spend more time in this world in the first place. And part of it is that the film, I think, explores quite a great many themes, which may be too many themes, in that Matter of Life and Death, Colonel Blimp, and Red Shoes all are very, like, when you think of them, you think very clearly of the narrative arc, which is representing a theme. Black Narcissus is kind of a jumbled mess of a bunch of different themes, and it doesn't really spend enough time on any of them to say something coherent. And I think the main one that is trying to get across is the human tendency to try to change the world around you, and the inability of that to actually happen.
Yeah, that was a big one I got. But that's what I mean when it feels literary. Obviously, it's based on a book, but something like, A Brighter Summer Day is always my go-to literary film, where it's never pointed in one direction, but there's enough there to gather all sorts of different meanings on different watches. But this one is so efficient and short that it feels less like a grab bag of themes and more so they spilled it all over the table and trying to pick one up.
A grab bag of themes. Wonderful. The part of the film where I really would like more is it Sister Ruth, the one that goes crazy?
Yes.
So we didn't really explain this. I mean, I'm sure people have seen this, or maybe they haven't. It's about a group of nuns who move to
Calcutta.
From Calcutta, they moved to a monastery, which used to be like a harem brothel for a Indian sultan on top of a huge high cliff in the Himalayas. And they try to set up a convent there, and nature and the people around them kind of intervene, and it doesn't go as planned. And one of the sisters, Sister Ruth, kind of goes insane. And I think there's enough there to make it work, but I would have really liked just a little more from her character, because we barely get to know her, and then she's going insane at the end.
Yeah. There's a jealousy thing that's established pretty early on, but
yes, but it's
0 to 60
it's established, and the film decides to do other stuff, and then it comes back to it, and then decides, and it for the amount of time spent on the main, I can't remember her name, the main nun,
Black Narcissus.
The
titular narcissist.
The titular. She gets a lot of time in the film, and
she does.
We develop her backstory, her motivations, why she is a nun, why her change in the film is happening, and I think just that was missing from Sister Ruth, who was very important to the climax of the film. And just a little bit more of like that vein of stuff throughout the film might have made it a bit more cohesive for me.
It's very good looking though,
because it's just, Sister Ruth is like, oh, okay, now I'm jealous and it's time to say no.
Dean is also the weirdest looking hot guy in any movie. he's the archetypal hot guy, with his weird shorts and his
I
hairy
wa-
Gumby body.
I watched it with my mom, and we were both laughing. He's on like a pony. His feet are essentially on the ground, dragging as he's plomping along on this pony.
Where was the Matter of Life and Death guy?
David Niven?
Yeah. Do you know he was James Bond?
Oh, for like a brief moment? Was he like one of the...
Yeah, it was one really bad movie.
Yes.
The titular James Bond.
Black Narcissus, good movie.
Yeah, it's good. It's A tier. I'll say A tier Palin Pressburger.
Yes.
Which is, even a disappointing Palin Pressburger is still a damn good movie.
That is true. I'm going to try to go through two things really quickly before we get Nick on the podcast. I watched my 3 films by Louis Buñuel.
Oh yeah, you finally saw the discreet charm of the bourgeoisie.
Discreet charm of the bourgeoisie, which is, regardless of what you think of the film, is one of the greatest film titles ever.
It's true. It's true.
Then I watched The Phantom of Liberty, and then I rewatched That Obscure Object of Desire. And Buñuel is a very interesting director because none of his films are masterpieces. None of them are like blowing me out of the park with their aesthetic uses of the film aesthetic, or with narrative and all that kind of stuff, pacing, anything like that. But every single one of them, I just find so effective in their storytelling and the way he does it. It's almost like he's a low budget filmmaker, because he films in sets that look like almost like they should be out of TV or something, just kind of flat lighting. Like none of it's very expressive or anything, but it all works so well. And in particular, Discreet Charm of Bourgeoisie kind of, I was mixed on it after finishing it because it was kind of dull, because it is the driest of satires ever created in the history of the world. It's so dry, it's just like cracking. The ground is cracking with dryness. They've sucked out all the water, and you just kind of have to go with that.
For some reason, I thought that was a very goofy movie.
It is. It is, but goofy in the driest way possible. Like it is never conscious of its goofiness. It is never drawing attention to that. It is doing very silly things while keeping the straightest face possible. And it gets more interesting the more I think about it. And I never disliked it. Like it was between a 4 and a 4.5 for me. And I eventually settled at a 4.5 because it is a film that I can keep thinking about for quite a long time and still get new meaning out of it. And it is certainly unique, like a lot of Buñuel's films. The next film, Phantom of Liberty, is one of the most interesting structured films of all time, and I highly recommend it. And I don't know why I was so engrossed by it, but it is literally, it starts out with like an opening scene, and then it cuts to a character who was reading a book, and the book was the opening scene. And then we follow that character for a little bit. And then when that story does something interesting, Buñuel decides to follow another character who was a part of that story. And it's just like, it's like ping-ponging between a bunch of different stories in the movie. And they're all about the kind of societal lies we tell ourselves, the phantom of liberty, the illusion of liberty in everyday life, and kind of the wild, or I don't know what the word is I'm looking for here, but it's very interesting. It's a bit less dry than Discreet Charm of Bourgeoisie. There's a great scene in which a professor is talking about some cultures are different than ours, and some things that you do might seem weird to someone else. And then it cuts to a scene where a bunch of people like arrive for like a dinner party, and they sit down at a table, except the chairs are all toilets, and they're going to the bathroom. And they're reading newspapers, and then someone says, "I'm feeling a little hungry." Like, shh, that's rude to say at the table. And someone's like, "Please excuse me, I'm going to go have dinner." And then they go into what you would assume is a bathroom, but like a door pops open and they start eating a meal. So the thing is like, it's like a backwards. Like if society had like, instead of eating dinner, you sat down to take a shit and you go into a private room to eat food. And it's why the whole film is just nonsense like that. And it's great. I've made mention of That Obscure Object of Desire. Still like it. Great film. We are pressed for time because I think Nick wants to get on the podcast. So I will reserve my comments maybe for, I was going to talk about some of the Fellini things, but I can save those for another time.
Quick update. I see because it's in the background there, Taste of Cherry. I sat on it for a bit and I also gave it a 5. So I'm up to 4 5 stars this year so far. Taste of Cherry is very good.
Yes, I just pulled out all of the criterions that I got recently, and so they didn't get lost.
That means
in the shuffle.
No, I have 4 5 stars. That means all of I've seen 2 Kiarostami's so far, and both of them were 5 stars. So I guess Certified Copy is next.
Oh, I forgot to mention in our Black Narcissist discussion, a lot of the background paintings looked like they were Bob Ross inspired products.
That's true. It's true. I'm a big fan of that. We should just stop filming movies in real locations and just paint them all.
Return to only studio.
Please.
I mean, at the very least, more films could be made just in the studio. Lean into
they could use that
artificiality of film.
They can use those things they use on The Mandalorian. You know what I'm talking about?
Green screens?
No, it's not. They're not even green screens. What they have for The Mandalorian is that they have these giant, like, circular rooms, and the walls are like projected LED images.
Rear screen projection, but the modern version of it.
Yes. Those are awesome. Unsurprisingly, the director of Chef is an innovator.
We'd like to welcome our friend Nick back to the podcast. Welcome back,
Nash
Nick.
Johnson.
Thank you.
It's always
I'll just stay in the guest room at this point. I mean, I might as well just live there. Ironically enough, they got a lot of guest rooms in the film we're about to talk about, actually.
There are, yes, lots of guests. How I don't know if we want to talk about this, but you recently did a 30-day movie challenge, which didn't end up being 30 days.
Yeah, let's call it a 20-day movie challenge. I still have
still
my
a good
Paddington
amount
cup
of
right
movies.
here with the last 10 movies in it.
Oh, look at that. You still haven't watched Harakiri, which sad.
I will.
That's what you and Sanju have in common.
Yeah, you do.
You know what? The first movie I pulled was 8.5 to Jacob's,
At some
Restless
point.
Nights.
I love how both of you had the challenges and both of you stopped at both Harakiri and John Cassavetes. Wise.
Not by design. Not by design.
So what Nick had us do, myself, Chandler, and our friend Nate, who has also been on the podcast before, he had all 3 of us pick 10 movies. No, not Nate. Sanju.
Sanju.
Sanju has also been on the podcast before.
Has he?
And it's such a beautiful day.
That's right.
And we all 3 of us picked 10 movies each, and to recommend Nick, and then Nick watched them, and then our Brandon Sanju decided to do the same thing, but he's not here, so that's not important. Nick, how did your movie challenge go?
Oh man,
what were your favorites and what were your least favorites?
Honestly, just to preface, I think that is significantly more challenging than most people realize. It is like essentially having a second job. You have to dedicate like 2 or 3 hours of your day every day to just watching a movie and thinking about it, and that is, especially for someone like me, that is just so hard. And after a while, it just becomes like monotonous, I guess, a little bit, and that's probably what contributed to me like just stopping at some point. But
well, just to interject real quick, I think there's an added layer of difficulty, and it's partially why I would struggle even with like a 30-day movie challenge thing, even though I watch 30 movies in a month, always, is that it's the lack of freedom that you are forced to. You pick a movie and you are watching that movie today, regardless of how you are feeling. And quite frankly, there are some movies that we put in that cup that are not good for some days. So it's different.
Yeah, like movies that are really long. Yeah, I actually made it 21, as a matter of fact.
Which is pretty good.
Maybe it's just because I blacked out Chef. I just I thought of
Hey.
the other 20 movies that I watched. But I mean, I could have said I also blacked out Putney Swope too. So I mean, either one of those probably could have been blacked out.
Oh, that's right. We watched Putney Swope together, all three of us, and we also watched Big Night.
Both of those are great. I love. I mean,
Both great. Both are awesome.
They're both fine. The first one's just kind of dumb. But yeah, I find that a challenge. I feel like another month at this point in the year, or Jesus, what did I even just say? Another month at some point this year, I'm going to try it again. Try and watch a movie every day, but that shit is so hard. Because at this point, it's just pride. It's just like I just want to freaking do it. At this, I feel like I've tried to do it at this point probably 2 or 3 times, and I've failed every time. I did it in like February of 2020 as well, right before the end of the world. And I think I made it like 2 weeks in on that one. So this one I made it 3 weeks in. So I mean, by natural progression, hopefully I'll do the whole month next time. In terms of my favorite movies from that I watched. Naked. That's a good one.
That's a
Good
classic.
movie. We've discussed on the podcast before.
Dog Day Afternoon.
That's
Another great one.
Sidney Lumet.
I have a personal connection to Hoop Dreams. I think that movie's amazing. And F for Fake. Also amazing. But none of them as good as Yee Yee.
I'm
I
glad
think
you
Yee
tried
Yee
it.
is the best. I think Yee Yee is the best movie I watched of the 21.
Ah.
Chandler visibly upset.
Visibly.
I'm not
Naked's
sure
number
why he is,
Naked's
'cause
number
he
2
likes
though.
Yee.
But Yee Yee
I love
is
Yee.
that's a beautiful
Yee
movie.
is a masterpiece.
Yee.
It is a masterpiece. Yee.
Yee.
Some of the worst ones I watched. Oh God.
Yeah, we don't have to call him out if you.
Okay.
Unless there's a really bad.
Well,
one. Well, you watch.
there's
Chef.
just Chef. There's Chef.
I'm glad Putney Swope isn't as bad as Chef.
I don't even know, honestly.
Well, that would be factually incorrect. As we know,
And the third
film
worst
is
movie on here?
objective, so it couldn't be worse than Chef.
Exactly. Film is completely objective. I think like it doesn't do this film. I think Creep was just kind of like okay, but it was the 19th best movie I watched just because there were so many other ones that were great.
There's some bangers that were recommended too. Let's not beat around the bush there.
Yeah, like the top 10 are all, I think I gave like 9 or 10 5 stars. So I mean, there was a lot of good movies in
Which
there.
we try to recommend you 5-star films quite often.
I hope. I would hope.
Although a me 5-star and a Jacob 5-star are very different. Not really, actually. They're all pretty
I
similar.
mean, I've watched like a third of the amount of movies you guys have watched, so a 5-star for me is probably different too. But
no, you watched a third of the amount of movies I've watched, and then I've watched a third of the amount of movies that Jacob's watched. So by multiplicative properties, you've watched a 9.
oh God, multiplicative properties.
I think that if we did the math that way, I don't think that'd be too far off.
Probably not.
But
Probably not.
speaking of films that
That's
we
'cause
have
I'm a
all
gamer.
seen, and I am less so. I
That's not
have
true.
one
You
game.
do know Civ. You have one
I have
game
one
that
game.
you have an obsession with.
You dominate us in every time we play.
Obsession might be the wrong word. I think addiction is the correct word here.
Oh,
It's a love-hate relationship. Some days I am
tomatoes, potatoes.
loving, and some days I am playing it and hating it. But I play it anyway. And that's
The game he's
second
talking
time
about
we've
is Cooking
mentioned
Mama.
Civ in this discussion.
It
this
is.
podcast episode, which is more 2 times more than any other podcast episode.
It's true.
But I was about to say, speaking of movies, all 3 of us have seen.
Segue.
Segue. Who wants to introduce our first main film discussion? Nick, how about you do it since you're the guest?
So this is a film called Nomadland, or Nomadland. I guess the title was very intentional. It's a film by Chloe. I don't know how to pronounce it. It's probably Zhao.
Zhao or
Chloe
Zhao.
Zhao. I've only heard of one of her other movies, The Rider.
Mm-hmm.
I
Rider
never
looked
watched
awesome.
it, but I heard that was pretty good. And this is a film about I guess it would be a Midwesterner that was forced away from her home
Southwest.
after
She was in Nevada.
a company. A company town went out. Oh, I guess she was in Nevada. A company town went out of business. Factory was no longer needed. Town essentially got shut down, and she was forced out and became a nomad. And we kind of just lived through her eyes for a what feels probably like a year. It's probably like a year of her life. It's around there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it is a very compelling film. It is a very stream of consciousness film. It is very much a character study. I mean, I think this is the definition of a character study. And I was compelled throughout the entirety of the runtime, and I thought it was fantastic. So
it's very Malick-y.
It is. It is a Terrence Malick film that I like to
is
watch.
Terrence Malick. It is Terrence Malick. It is Terrence Malick, but not deathly boring and 4 hours long.
Well, Terrence Malick has his time and place, and he is a inherently pretentious director that can be a something working for him and something working against him at times. Hey, pretentious is not necessarily a bad thing. It is just there's kind of an air of greatness to some of the work he does, whether it's there or not. I think.
Oh, I mean, of course,
The Tree of Life. Great movie.
The pretentiousness comes from his level of skill and expertise in the craft. I mean, that goes without saying.
Anyway, but the point is Nomadland is very much kind of very similar in style, but kind of down to earth in a way that I think Malick tends to avoid. Just different styles, different types. To further that introduction, Nomadland just recently won the best drama at the Golden Globes. It is probably going to be nominated for the Best Picture Oscar, and I think it has a decent chance.
It's yeah.
Unless
our boy Mank pulls through.
Mank might pull through if
one's boy Mank is pulling through.
Hey, Mank's my boy.
Mank is figuratively walking through the drive-through to order,
stumbling.
But an interesting fun fact: if Minari, which I think is probably the favorite to win Best Picture,
is it?
At least I don't know. Maybe
because
you would think, right? You would
because
think.
I'm pretty sure.
No, it was disqualified from the Golden Globes because the Golden Globes are racist, but the
racist.
Oscars are a little more open to that thing.
Okay.
All I'm saying is if Minari were to win Best Picture, it would mean that a Korean language film has won 2 years in a row.
That would be amazing.
Pretty based, if I.
That would be remarkably based.
None of this has to do with Nomadland.
Compare it to another director, though, to come back to Nomadland.
Yes,
I part of me, it felt like I don't know if Chandler's probably either going to hate this comment or like this comment. It kind of felt like a Mike Leigh film in the fact that the characters just feel like real people and they don't really feel like characters. And I think that's because they were real people and not characters.
I think it's because they are real people.
I didn't really look that up. I was hoping one of you. Doesn't it feel like it kind of feels like a Mike Leigh film?
It feels like a Mike Leigh Western road trip movie.
Yes.
Because it is the entirety of the film is just based around hearing, like there's not plot necessarily. It's just a character and being with the characters and hearing from other characters about their character.
Exactly.
And is it exactly? No, of course not. It's not clearly not aping Mike Leigh's style, but there is some similarities there.
Well, the Mike Leigh style is very much creating a character from scratch, where this thing felt almost like a pseudo documentary, because it's obvious that these people have faced, if not the exact same issues, they're talking about similar issues. Like the one who dies, I don't think she died in this movie.
Swanky, who is an actual person. Like Swanky plays Swanky.
Yeah. Well, that's what I mean by this. It's pseudo documentary, like in the way that it has real people, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if the stories are real, but they feel very inspired by real events.
I would not be surprised if like there's a scene early on where there's like this camper community and there's a scene by a fireplace where there's a few different people who we only see once. They're sharing their stories. I don't know. That feels like something like they found people with interesting stories to share.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if those were actual.
Yeah, I was questioning if it was that or if it was just they got great stories and had actors do them, but then it didn't. Especially the woman of African descent that told the story felt way too real. Like that did not feel like an actor.
But it also kind of, I think the film's strong suit is that there's a lot of universal things within it. Like it's a very personal, it feels personal to Frances McDormand's main character, Fern. It's Fern.
Fern.
I always thought it was Vern. But it feels personal in a way that I think a lot of different people can relate to. Like it is a film of our times, and is particularly like it is. So the film is based on a book. I don't know if you knew this, and it was obviously it's a response about the effects of the financial downturn in 2008. And lo and behold, it is released in the midst of another financial downturn and a very troubling time for a lot of people. And a lot of people are in the process of perhaps losing their homes because of a loss of income. So it is, unfortunately, some people will be finding this film might be hitting close to home.
Oh God, don't say that. Close to Van?
Well, yeah, but some of those stories, like I have some like stories from my family that are kind of vaguely related to some of the stories that I heard in this film. So, and I think a lot of people could find tangentially related things, whether it might not be to the main character, but it might be to one of the other characters we meet along the way. Because there's one of the themes of the film is telling your story, because a lot of people tell their story and what they've been through and the hardships, which is great.
Yeah, as far as like pulling your own experiences out, one of the most impactful scenes for me is when her van wouldn't start. It's never fun having your car break down, especially when you have no money to fix it, and they're recommending like get a new van.
We all know that.
Yeah.
They're like, yeah, you're just gonna have to get a new car. And then there's like that moment where she starts to lie about how she's done a lot of work on it and and then she just tells the truth. And there's like little moments like that in Frances's performance that I think are great. There's another one that comes to mind where she's like in the Amazon workhouse the first time. She like walks by someone like smiling and like all happy-go-lucky, and then like the moment she walks away, it like slowly turns into like just neutral face again, and she keeps walking. I think like little moments like that are what make that character feel so real and work so well in this like documentary format.
She plays off these characters very well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm curious to know how much of this was improvisational. Because again, I was surprised to hear that it was based on a book, because it literally just sounded like to me that Chloe Zhao and Frances McDormand got together, went to this area, and just sort of workshopped a bunch of scenes with random people telling their stories, and then turned it into a movie. But the narrative elements really only come into play with the character, I forget his name, the guy who's in
Greg.
love with Frances.
Is it Greg?
Yeah.
Greg, yeah.
Wait, is it Greg?
Yeah.
I don't remember.
Okay.
From what
That
I
sounds
see,
right.
to clear this up, from what I see about the book is more so about the all these people who
Is it
made a
nonfiction?
camper lifestyle. Yes, it's a nonfiction.
Okay.
They adopted.
It's Dave, by the way.
Dave, not
just
Greg,
just to correct that, but
So the book
Sorry, go
Nomadland
ahead.
is about people who adopted a nomad lifestyle, traveling around the U.S., adopting seasonal work after the Great Recession. So that much. So it's probably about a bunch of different stories that I'm just making guesses here. And then the Frances McDormand character is kind of a construct of the film to kind of bring us through kind of a narrative to. Yes.
Well, the Maliki stuff too obviously also comes with some really great cinematography of just nature that's around us. A lot of Arizona nature in this.
there is a lot of Arizona in
This
this film.
film gets 10 brownie points for being filmed in Arizona and taking place in Arizona.
Yeah. But what I find interesting is that there's a lot of imagery that like interrupts these scenes. Lots of factories, be it like Amazon, those giant warehouse shots. I can't even conceive how big those warehouses are in Amazon. And then the potato farm, and the whatever the farm was that went under. But there's just gargantuan shots of these factories that just look like they're swallowing the earth whole. And they're swallowing all these resources, and to a certain extent, they're swallowing the people too. And that's what I found very interesting. That it's all these people. They're not even necessarily nomads. It's almost like they're fleeing this very. It's a lifestyle that goes against everything that nature is, and I find that interesting that they're just sort of like returning to monkey, in a way.
Dare I say, Chandler, this film is very based.
It's pretty
I think
based.
It is.
I think this is the most anti-capitalist film I've seen in a long time.
It is a very class conscious film, or at the very least hardship conscious. And
but it's not super pointed.
No, it's because it's mostly about.
I don't think it necessarily has an agenda.
Troubles, people like dealing with financial troubles and trying to live your life, and very subtly throughout the whole thing, the kind of the at odds that you work your entire life to have a good life, and then you retire and realize, well, you were supposed to be having a good life the entire time, and now you only have so much time left, and maybe you didn't save up enough money to have a good life. Maybe that money got disappeared in the recession, whatever. But it is very much, if not anti-capitalist, it is very much pointing fingers and placing some blame at the system that we live in.
I think the tribe leader has a great line where he says something. He's like talking over the fire, and he says something along those lines where he's like, "You're like a workhorse your whole life until you have to be put out to pasture or something," and it's like you just work until you can't work anymore, and then they kill you.
Real guy. Bob Wells. He started this kind of movement, so that whole thing in Quartzsite is, I believe, an actual thing that happens every year, which is very cool.
Well, it's stuff like that. Cool. Where they have the real stuff, and then they have obviously the dramatized stuff. That blurry line between reality and fiction is, I think, speaks more to what this movie's about. Because you can't ever really tell what exactly is real and what exactly is dramatized. So I think it makes you think about it more, which in turn helps you to unearth the relatively dense story here. Because on the one hand, it is a critique of our society, of our system, but it's also kind of a story about grief. Francis McDormand's
there's a lot of grief.
Moving on.
There's a lot of loss. Yeah. There's a lot of tragedy.
Especially,
I found the most tragic character the what was his name? Bob Evans, Mac and Cheese. What was that guy's name?
What?
Bob Wells.
Bob Wells.
He goes on that speech about how his son killed himself and how he's doing this all for him, and like that was a tragic. Just a tragic story to listen to. And those moments are the most tragic because that dude is not an actor. That dude's just actually telling his real story.
When he said he couldn't even say it out loud, you can feel
that. Even if some of these stories are made up, the casting in this film, I'm sure at least some people have been casted and put in the film. And the faces, lots of really good faces, just kind of the rugged American faces that you kind of see passing you in the street, but here they're put on center stage, and some of them get to share their stories, real or not. Well, it feels real because of these pseudo-real, these real, pseudo-real, and then fake narrative elements that are all kind of mixed together.
Well, that's another just inherent power of Frances McDormand, where she's in she looks just like she's just pretty enough where you're like, oh, she's an actress, but she also has a very realistic. Just everything about her feels real.
She's on the outer limits of Hollywood actresses.
Yeah.
In a good way. Really,
she's not like Meryl Streep or someone like that. Oh my God,
no. Interesting. I want to make a quick connection here to something I brought up earlier in the podcast. This is a very Abbas Kiarostami inspired product. Because there's a film, And Life Goes On, which is the second film in the Coker trilogy, which is Abbas Kiarostami visits a village where he filmed after an earthquake, and then later on casts someone as himself to go back and kind of recreate this whole thing. So it's a meta narrative where things are real, not real, and interesting. It feels very kind of inspired by Kiarostami's tendencies to mix the real and the dramatized.
Yeah. But that mixture, again, it makes you question everything.
Yeah, I was questioning. I was really thinking about. I really only think it's Francis and the Dave guy, and maybe Dave's family, and then obviously like the part with where she goes back to her sister's house. I think those are all. I think those are the only actors. From my educated guess, I think everyone else in the film.
I think all the nomads.
Like all the nomads were definitely real people, from my understanding. But it'd be interesting to look that up after this and actually.
Also a sad fact was the sound designer unfortunately died recently to this movie.
Oh no! Rest in peace. Beautiful sound design.
So there is some real tragedy behind
Loved a lot of his score, his choices of when to use score or whenever they use score.
I don't know if that's the score part is necessarily a sound designer.
The sound designer chooses
mixes
where it is.
Mixes, okay. Score I thought was also really good. A lot of people have been talking shit about the score.
Why?
I don't know.
I thought it was great.
There's a scene fairly early on when she is traveling from Nevada to Quartzsite, Arizona, and it plays piano music. And it starts off with, there's just beautiful scenery shots throughout the entire film. This is probably the best looking movie of last year. I think it's at least in the running for Some Kind of Heaven, which I talked about earlier on the podcast, and something else. I don't know. Anyway,
Mank.
But there's really Mank, of course. Man, how could I forget Mank? But there's a great shot where it's kind of like twilight in the snows of Nevada, and there's like a train passing through the center of the screen, and it's tranquil, but at the same time there's like a deep loneliness throughout the entire film, and I think it's communicated through the filmmaking itself. Lots of wide shots and really kind of close-ups too, because you get the intimate nature of hearing people's stories, but a lot of times, especially Fern, is just filmed from behind, filmed against huge landscapes. And, America can be a lonely place. And I think it does capture that quite well. Beautiful, but lonely.
I wonder what the schedule was like for this movie. Just so many shots that take place in like the early morning, golden hour, stuff like that. Must have been a bitch to shoot.
A lot of Arizona pink sunsets. It's beautiful. Almost like every Arizona shot is like a sunset, pretty much. It just makes me miss Arizona. For the podcast people that don't know, I moved to shitty Los Angeles 6 months ago, and I lived in Arizona my whole life.
Has it
so this
been
movie
6 months?
I am currently in the 5th month, actually, of my lease.
Still, that's wow.
That's still pretty crazy, but just makes me realize Arizona's a lot prettier than LA. You think LA is gonna be prettier, and then you get here and you're like, this place sucks. But there's a lot of like little things I noticed that I wanted to talk about. Like, there's a lot of shots of like Frances McDormand watching someone drive away. It happens like 4 or 5 times where it'll be like she's staring at a van driving away. I don't know if that, obviously I assume nomads don't stay around for very long, probably by design there. And also, she used like a Shakespeare as her wedding vows.
She's a teacher, if I remember correctly. Substitute teacher, at least.
That's right.
So
but it's like, what? Shakespeare? Like, isn't it a
wedding
wedding vow?
Whoa, are you saying coal miners can't be Shakespeare enjoyers?
No, that's not what I'm saying. But aren't vows supposed to be like more personal? Like, why would you just just straight up your vows are just Shakespeare poetry?
The man knew how to write romance.
You're not understanding.
You ever heard Tammy the Shrew?
Besides the relatability of a lot of people's stories, the character of Fern herself is
Francis.
We talked about, Nick mentioned it's a character study, and I think a lot of that is like beneath the surface, and it's not exactly initially obvious, but it's very clear that I think there's an effort to kind of empathize with this kind of person. There's some stigmatization by a certain group of people in this country of people who don't have jobs, people who don't have homes. I won't mention this group of people, but they're not good people.
The right.
Cut. Cancel.
I'll be the based one on the podcast.
But right, like there's this idea in this country that if you don't have a job and you're not working, that you're somehow lazy and you're not worth the same as other people, and you know it's a ridiculous idea. And
Don't
I
believe
think
in that.
a lot of the subtle character work with Frances McDormand is directly kind of not responding to that, but dealing with that. In that she has very early in the film, she is going to a work center to help her find a
like
job.
an unemployment office.
Yeah, an unemployment office or something like that. It didn't seem like an unemployment. It doesn't.
It kind of
Does
seemed
unemployment
like one, I don't
office
know.
help you find work?
Yeah,
Okay, this just goes to show.
at least they
you
do in the
my
movies.
privilege.
I don't know.
And she says, I like work. I want to work. And you know, she's an older
Mhm.
person. And a lot of these people who don't have work, they want to. And it's not a question of, oh, just get a job. It's a question of, well, where? And even more interesting, I think, is the pride that she has in her life and
Mhm.
as a person, because throughout the film, she is constantly refusing help from others. And I find that very interesting. And I don't necessarily know how to fully communicate that idea of her as a character. But like in the beginning, she meets the mother and the two kids who she tutored. And they're like, oh, you can
Mhm.
stay at our place. They're very warm and giving to her. And she's like, no, I just want to be on my own. And then, you know, of course, throughout the film, there's more instances of this where one person's like, oh, there's a church down the road that you could spend the night at. And she's like, no, I don't want that. And I find that like the pride that Americans have in their livelihood, their well-being tends to lead them to not accept help from others. And there's this feeling that you need to be self-sufficient, that you need to be working for your livelihood, that you need to be taking care of your basic needs. And I think that's a very interesting character choice, and it works.
In relation to that scene, the most heartbreaking scene in the entire movie is when she leaves the dog.
We all wanted her to take the dog, but she doesn't.
You thought you were waiting for the comedy shot where she walks back into frame and grabs the dog again, and they even held on that shot for like ever. Like you think she's gonna walk back in frame, and then they just cut away. I'm like, oh, that dog's a nomad now. That dog's in Nomadland.
God, one of the most haunting shots of this whole movie is when she revisits her home.
Oh, that was
the whole town is gone. The home is just a shell. It's still home technically, but there's nothing there. It's barren. There's not even furniture in there. It's a very, very haunting. Remember how we talked a few weeks ago, Jacob, about this idea of empty office buildings? That liminal space quality to it. It's like she was entering the liminal space.
Ghost town. She entered a liminal space in that town. That was something else.
Fantastic.
And very John Ford Searchers-esque ending.
That's what I was gonna say that as well. It's very reminiscent of, and it's also I thought about it too. You can line up that shot of her in the doorway with the shot. There's like one shot when right before she leaves Dave's house where she's sitting in a chair at the family room, and she's like centered, silhouetted on we're behind her, and then she walks out, and that framing of her in the chair and her in the doorway are like the exact same, which I noticed. I don't know if that was intentional or not. It looked pretty intentional, but I don't know what she's trying to say with that.
Yeehaw.
She's trying to say yeehaw donkey. I just looked it up, by the way, while you guys were discussing that. David Strathairn was the person that played Dave. He is an actor, and he was beside George Clooney in the film Good Night, Good Luck.
Yes.
The one he
I don't
directed?
know if you've ever seen that. No, he was acting in that.
No, George
alongside
Clooney
George
directed
Clooney
that, didn't he?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
did he? He probably did. I have no idea. I've never seen that movie.
I have.
He's directed
Don't
many
remember
great
it all.
films. Suburbicon.
Shout outs to Dave. Who's his actual name is David, so I wonder they literally just got these actresses' names and just changed them a little bit. Not even Dave,
Fern,
they just
Francis,
kept his name.
David, Dave.
Fern, yeah.
Yeah.
Because Fran, who named someone Fran? Like
It's Francis, which is a common English name,
yeah, but like if
but they say Francis.
they say
Francis.
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 Oh.
At least that's how Mark Kermode says it.
I also thought that part was beautiful when Swanky sends her the video back at the place.
Oh,
That shot ends with like her just holding an eggshell, and then she just like slowly places it in the water, and then it cuts, and that's like the last thing we see of Swanky.
there's that line
Spoilers.
that's in the trailer where he says, you know, you never say goodbye, just say see you down the trail, which I think is a nice
See down the road.
See you down the road, yeah. Which is, again, it's a very spiritual line. This idea that we exist beyond our physical bodies, but is nice.
Lots of little
Comforting.
kernels of wisdom in this film, and you know, you might not be receptive to all of them immediately, but I think it has the potential to be a good movie to kind of return to again and again.
When I'm
you
homeless,
can find some new things, new meaning as you grow older. Particularly, I mean, it is a film about growing older and getting old and dealing with that. So that will have some longevity.
It's getting huge. It's getting a lot of runtime at LA drive-in theaters.
Yeah, as
it's a good drive-in.
It's still in theaters.
Yeah,
this would be a very interesting movie to watch in a car.
I wonder if this will get a Criterion. That Chloe Zhao was on the special features to A New World. Or Brave New World, whatever the Terrence Malick one I didn't watch is.
Oh well, then
wait, she was on that.
She's
on the special features, yeah.
This makes too much sense.
She's a big fan.
Watch the special features and not the movie.
I didn't watch it either. I just know that it's. I've heard it.
Okay.
Yes.
I didn't watch the special features either. To be fair,
she's an interesting filmmaker.
This film feels like a neo-western.
Yeah. I could see that.
Yes, not a revisionist
Definitely.
western, a neo-western, and not too many of those, but it definitely feels like something that is.
Yeah, on paper it is a western.
I mean, it is and it isn't. It doesn't. It clearly has none of the character tropes of that genre, but it does have the space,
archetypal,
the setting, the loner protagonist, the
van
the
is a
journey.
horse.
The van is a
she
horse.
eats beans. A lot of shitting in this movie.
It's named Vanguard.
Sorry.
The van named Vanguard.
Yeah. Good movie. I like it.
That is a fantastic movie. I wanted to question though why 4 stars. I took that personally.
Me?
Yeah. What is it about it that you didn't like?
I don't know.
A reasonable question.
It's kind of like
don't know.
What'd you give
Because
it,
I intentionally kept it.
Oh.
I intentionally was gonna wait until the end of the podcast, but I'm thinking. I think a minimum 4.5, but I'm questioning if I'm gonna do 5.
I think it is a 4.5 because it is a bit meandering, kind of on purpose. But like, I was watching a little bit again today during work, and I think the first half an hour is extremely tight. It goes by really quickly, and then it kind of slows down, like until when the camper people in Quartzsite disperse, and then the film kind of like goes, and you're not quite sure where it's going. And by design, like the film is nomadically wandering through its plot.
Yeah.
And you kind of get a sense more later on when she goes, her car breaks down, and then she fixes that, and then she goes to visit her friend, and then she leaves him. It kind of picks up again with some momentum. There's kind of a middle area where she's just wandering and trying to find herself, and I think it's quite purposely that, but at the same time, it may feel a little slow to people and hard to get through that middle section. It's
to bring it back to a previous discussion, reminds me a lot of Wild Strawberries, where very vague plots, lots of interactions with characters that you're not entirely sure how they fit all together until you get some time to think about it. So I watched it. I'm like, I can't tell if it was intentionally meandering or that just happened to be that way. It felt like a movie that they were just making improvisational, sort of an improvisational movie to an extent. And I'm still just working out in my mind how well it worked. So 4 is usually like my placeholder star count. So
4.5. I'm gonna put it 4.5. I don't think it's.
I think some of the editing is amazing. I think to back to your point of that first act, I think is paced beautifully. I wrote down in here that this film is almost structured like Memories, was what I wrote. It almost feels like it's, like I said earlier, stream of consciousness. I feel like a lot of the editing, you'll see like these little tidbits of these moments, and they'll just be like cut together, almost like we're seeing like a montage of her whole day, with just like we're seeing like the best bits. And I find a lot of the pacing, a lot of the editing really interesting, and this will be one I will rewatch because of that. Another note on here I wrote, Frances naked, LOL.
Oh, swimming,
Frances
yeah.
was indeed naked. She was naked.
I did not expect to see Frances McDormand's vagina today, but I did.
Maybe Chloe Zhao was just like, "Hey, Frances, you want to go swimming in this natural hot springs naked for free?"
See, I
mean,
respect the hell.
that looked wonderful. I would definitely go down. I could get down with getting naked in that hot.
I mean, it was
That
just like
great.
3 shots and then done. It wasn't even a scene.
It was once again stream of consciousness editing. It was on screen for like 20 seconds.
Well, see, I don't know if I've said
on.
this before, but she is one of my favorite actresses.
She's great,
and I very much appreciate that she's just hit a certain level of success where I almost feel like Meryl Streep hit a similar level of success, but then she kind of played it safe, you know, as far as the roles that she chose. Frances McDormand is just going for it. She's everywhere. She's one of those actors that a lot like Ethan Hawke, who like isn't afraid to play their age. You know, not afraid to put themselves out there and just be unafraid. And this is one of those movies that I just respect the hell out of. She went for a very unconventional movie by essentially, I mean, she was established previously with some films, but she's a pretty, prior to this, unknown filmmaker making experimental movies that just happened to also get a lot of Oscar attention. So bravo, both Chloe and Frances.
Yeah.
My favorite Frances role personally was Transformers 3.
Where does this rank? I don't think I know Nick hasn't particularly seen many 2020 movies, but where does this rank in the 2020 estimation, Chandler?
I have to double check. I will
start. Okay,
go.
Since I know, and I'll give you a second to pull that up. I have put it at number 4 for my 2020, which is lower than I would have expected, but I still, you know, Brenton's here. Another Round is still my favorite. And then City Hall, which is a documentary, and I still love that for some reason. I don't know why. First Cow, and then Nomadland. And then Sound of Metal. I think those are 5 best things I've seen so far.
I'm going to go put it at number 5. Nomadland, Another Round. I'm thinking of anything, Sound of Metal, and I'm not memeing. It's Mank's my favorite so far.
No, I know.
I love Mank.
Mank.
I've seen 5 movies this year.
5
last year. 3 of them were awful, and 2 of them were awful. One of them was okay, and 2 of them were great.
What was the awful one?
Hubie Halloween.
Oh,
Hubie Halloween and Onward. I think both of those movies are terrible.
You didn't like Hubert Halloween?
I think The Five Bloods is okay. And then I'm thinking of Ending Things and Nomadland were both great. But I think Hubie Halloween and Onward were insufferable.
You know, 2020 really had some shitters. Some real shitters. It
had some absolute shitters. Shitters everywhere.
I mean,
Mulan. Very
watch more good movies.
Mulan
There's a lot of those movies you named are ones that I wanted to watch.
I forgot about
I know I like Sound of Metal just by the...
Dick Johnson is Dead as well.
Dick Johnson is dead. Yes,
that's a good one. Oh,
Nick Johnson.
Yeah, Sound
Dick
of Metal. Sound of Metal. I'm very excited for the Criterion. That's all I'll say.
Oh, that's right.
Did they announce that?
They did. Yeah.
Oh,
Sound of Metal
awesome.
and One Night in Miami.
Yeah. Which is
One Night in Miami, really?
You can watch. It's on Amazon Prime.
It's on Prime, yeah.
I can't believe that one.
Actually, I just realized I have not ranked One Night in Miami. One Night in Miami.
I thought you said 4 when we talked.
I'll move.
One of the nights we were here for, it's completely unrelated, but one of the nights we were here looking for apartments when we were getting ready to move here was Hulu's drive-in premiere of that film.
Huh.
And we missed buying tickets by like a few hours when it sold out, or we would have went.
Did anyone see Run?
No.
That one's good.
I think
same guy did Searching.
20 movies this year that I would consider to be
really
good movies, good or better.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
2019 was pretty hard to follow.
Well,
it sounds like it.
it-
I don't know.
did
We
well.
got Mank.
2019
Like I
is
said-
very hard to follow, and then added on top of that, there was a pandemic and no one wanted to release their stuff.
I have previously established that I refuse to watch Mank until Chandler watches Ghostbusters. So
Well,
I'm gonna
I
keep
guess
that.
we're going to the grave.
Mank Busters.
Keep that over my head. I will die. I'll put on my tombstone I never watched Mank.
Who are you gonna call?
I guarantee you,
Mank.
the one tragedy. Well, not one. There's multiple tragedies of this pandemic. I guarantee you. I know next to nothing about the movie aside from the trailer. I guarantee you, a French Dispatch came out this year. That would have been my number one.
Probably.
But alas.
Probably. If you are attempting to
Shout outs to
speak,
Wes.
Brenton, we can't hear you. But I'll just make mention of that.
I assume.
Oh,
that he
I just
had
saw
himself
Brendan's in
muted
the call.
until.
Yes, I assume he is muted on purpose, but you don't want to assume too much, as
You don't want to assume too much.
to quote a famous film.
Which one?
So any
Serious
other-
Man?
What?
Assume too much. What line is that from?
No, it's from The Phantom Menace. You assume too
Oh.
much.
Did you know that the guy who plays Cy Abelman is in WandaVision?
Ah,
Look, I'm
Ah.
gonna watch it now.
But yes, great movie.
Nomadland, watch it.
So now I've been here for pretty much every American film ever made. Nomadland, Nashville, Jaws, and American Movie. That's all we need.
That's a good amount of pretty damn American movies.
yeah.
Nick's our
Those are
resident
4
patriot.
American movies.
No,
right
I
there.
didn't realize. Oh,
Oh, God.
you were on for Phantom
most
Thread.
the most leftist friend in the group is the biggest patriot.
Phantom Thread. No, Jacob's the most leftist in the group.
Oh yeah, Phantom Thread. That's not very American, but
He's a literal Jewish communist.
I'm cutting that out of the podcast. I'm not keeping that in.
he's a Jewish Soviet.
I'm not ready. I'm not ready to.
Were we not-
He's been outed.
Dude, have you been a Russian spy this whole time, Jake?
I'm a sleeper agent for Vladimir Putin. I was as a baby. They placed like code words. I'm a Manchurian candidate. That's what I am.
One of your words to activate is just Mank. If you say Mank 3 times, you'll go to the White House immediately.
Jacob was actually the creator of the Wide Putin meme in an effort to make Putin seem less terrifying.
more
less thin.
approachable.
But Nomadland, great movie. Loved that
Watch it.
one. I would definitely say watch it.
I have watched
Once you're in-
35 movies from 2020, and I still think I have watched nothing from that year. It
Watch
is
5.
if I were to go to my letterbox stats, I think it shows me like how many movies I've seen from every single year, and I think 2020 is like 2019.
I watched 40 in 2019, and in 2020 I watched 5. Sad.
Sad.
Where is it? Here it is. Okay, so I watched 80 movies made in the year 2019, and I've at 30 for 2020. So it's just kind of bloop.
May have been more 2020 movies I watched actually that I haven't even added to this list.
Oh, before they announce the Oscars winners, I'm gonna watch
Maybe
Money
announce the
Plane just so I can
nominations
get
yet.
in on that before the hype starts.
Money Plane.
It is strange. We are in March, and there is still no Oscar nominations, no Oscars, nothing. They just finished.
Just give it to
voting today, I
Mank and
believe.
call it a year.
Oh, Borat subsequent movie film. So I've seen 3 horrendous movies this year. Never mind. Maybe up
Borat
a bit.
looked pretty good.
All right. Yeah. Well, I don't know what this movie is, so I guess I'll hop out then.
What was the first film?
the movie. Nomadland.
Oh, that's what you guys were talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it.
Well, actually, we spent
The only thing people are talking about at USC is Nomadland.
really that
It's
much
very
garbage?
good.
Like every single time I'm in class, the professor will ask, "What have people seen this week?" And there's always the obligatory, "Oh, I rewatched Nomadland. It's fantastic.
Does
I love
anyone
it." Never
does
seen
anyone
it.
raise their hand like I watched Mank?
Hey,
No one's mentioned Mank yet.
Sound and Metal?
No.
Yeah, we actually had the director, producer,
Darius.
and the main actor. I forget his name. Is he Patel?
Riz Ahmed.
Riz Ahmed.
Riz Ahmed.
Riz
Yeah.
Ahmed.
They zoomed into a seminar.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, very cool.
That is the
Ooh,
movie
what is
that
your
I think
drink
is
today?
technically the best movie of the year, but my heart goes to Mank.
It's Topo Chico.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, is that sparkling water?
It's sparkling water. It's Mexican sparkling water from the finest
It's
river mines.
That is my favorite sparkling water. I just never have a bottle opener on me.
Yeah.
So whenever I see it at the gas station, I just don't get it.
It's so nice though. It's like healthy Sprite, I guess.
Does it have lime in it?
Yeah. This is the lime flavored one.
Okay.
Then there's a grapefruit one and the normal one.
Because I get the Perrier with
Mm.
orange. That's pretty good. Sparkling water underrated.
So what have you guys been up to?
Watching movies.
Good.
Let's get into the discussion and then we can have a chat afterwards about random stuff.
Very well.
Just because this is a jam-pack episode.
I have
of
notes.
a great many
Wow.
things. I do
To
have
quote a
notes.
serious man.
Yes. So this is, I'm going to have Brenton introduce and give a little summary of the film. But before that, I would just like to remind people that we are on our BFI Sight and Sound movie of the week. This is The Good and the Bad, the Ugly from 1966, and it is on the director's list. It is not on the critics list.
Dumb.
It is- I suppose so. It should be. Well, I will not say.
That mirrors the way it was received when it first came out, I think.
What is good? I want to figure out the bad. No. Ugly. There we are. It is number 59 on the director's list. It is tied. Oh, goody. We can go for another tie listing out here. It is tied at 59 with Blow Up, The Conformist, Greer, The Wrath of God, Gertrude, Woman Under the Influence, The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, Blue Velvet, The Grand Illusion. Those are all at 59 because the
Jeez.
BFI does
Oh my
ties for
God.
some reason.
Bangers.
Which one of those have you
A whole
guys
lot
done
of them.
episodes on yet?
We've done Blue Velvet,
and
Grand Illusion. That's it?
Badlands. Oh, well, that's yeah. Never mind. Ignore me.
Badlands sucks.
Yes. So, Brenton, please tell us what this film is.
You never said I had to prepare anything, okay? It's gonna be off the cuff. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is a spaghetti western from the late 60s, right? 1967?
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
It stars Clint Eastwood, Lee Van Cleef, and Eli Wallach. And it is the story of three outlaws hunting for buried Confederate gold. And they travel across the southwest of the United States in the middle of the Civil War. And it's fantastic.
Famed Mexican actor Eli Wallach.
Famed.
May I
do
say
we
the greatest
do we know
western? One of them.
that Eli Wallach is Jewish?
Yes, I did know that.
It's great. I was watching some behind the scenes features of him later on, and he looks very. I think if you don't look Jewish when you're younger, your Jewishness becomes more pronounced as you get to an old man stage because
So
the
like
nose
by
kind
the
of.
time he's in The Godfather, is that when he's like full Jewish?
Yeah.
I feel like we need to make this distinction that Jacob is Jewish, so he's allowed to point that out.
Well, I think anyone is, but I don't mind as much. Anyway, I would like to do a fun little thing here. I was incensed today. I was angry beyond words with Google related to The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. So I looked it up, and Google has like the little sidebar thing when you look up a movie. It gives you the IMDb, Rotten Tomatoes score, yada yada yada, and it gives you a summary of the film. And this might be the literal worst summary of a movie I've ever heard in my entire life. So much so that I was inspired to actually send feedback to Google to tell them that their summary of The Good and the Bad, the Ugly was wrong. Let me read it for you.
Wow.
In the Southwest during the Civil War, a mysterious stranger, Joe, Clint Eastwood, and a Mexican outlaw, Tuco, Eli Wallach, form an uneasy partnership. Joe turns in the bandit for the reward money, then rescues him just as he is being hanged. When Joe's shot at the noose goes awry during one escapade, a furious Tuco tries to have him murdered. The men re-team abruptly, however, to beat out a sadistic criminal and the Union Army and find $20,000 that a soldier has buried in the desert.
Wait, what?
Nonsense.
It
Absolute
started
nonsense.
solid.
I was like kind of
started
following
solid.
along until you got to that last part, which is just wrong.
I mean, the whole
Yeah.
thing is wrong. One, Clint Eastwood's character has no name. That's like
Right.
That's the appeal.
that's the whole thing. And two, his name is Blondie technically, or his nickname in the film. Three, he doesn't form an uneasy partnership with Tuco. They are already in the fucking partnership when the film begins. Like you start with that,
Yes.
and Tuco doesn't break off their arrange or
Partnership.
Blondie doesn't break off their arrangement because he failed to make the shot. He breaks it off because he just leaves him in the desert. And then they don't re-team to beat a sadistic criminal.
That, you know what that description of the movie was? It was as if like someone in a foreign language didn't watch the film, but they looked up the review or like a synopsis on Wikipedia of it, and it gave them the translated version from English to whatever their native language is. Then they took that, they read it, and then they wrote it up in their native language for like a school assignment, and then that was then translated back into English and used in the Google description.
I think you got it. I think this is outsourced work to a foreign country that has been translated back.
I
there's
have
no other
a
explanation
little
for it.
bit of sympathy for them because when you really try to sum up the plot, it is pretty dense as far as what happens, but it can be way better summed up than that.
Anyway,
I
hope
do
they
want
change
to.
it.
I
I've submitted
really,
feedback.
really would love to know your guys' like history with the film, because I have, and like it's not some weird history, but in terms of like the spaghetti western and where it sat on my list, I kind of came up with my own top 5 westerns. It was very tough to make, by the way, because at 5 there's so many just on the cusp for me that I had to knock off. So in no particular order, I have a top 5 written down. And I was also, I guess this would be a break in the podcast or edit it out, but like, what are the talking points that we want to hit? Because there's so much to talk about with this movie.
I don't really have any.
I guess we
specific
can
ones.
all,
I'm
like-
just kind of going with it.
Okay, cool. Okay.
We can start with histories though.
I think we should attempt to go in some kind of chronological order when critiquing the film. Chandler and I have failed at this many a time, and I just would like to remind us that is a potentially helpful way of the audience following a discussion.
Gotcha. Okay.
But
So we got the plot synopsis down.
yes,
Excellent.
our little intro shenanigans have been out of the way. I don't know when the first time I watched this movie was. It was probably at my dad's, and he probably showed me the film back when I was, I want to say like 13, maybe 10, 13. It was definitely around that era.
Yeah.
And it was good. Like I didn't really know anything about film to know how much I actually enjoyed it, or even to be cognizant of the fact that I enjoyed it. I wasn't sure that was possible with the film. You just watched movies. I mean, what else do you do with them?
Right.
And then I have returned to it many times over the years, and it's one of those movies that every time I watch it, it just keeps on giving. And some really good movies I get tired of watching over and over again, but this one I return to it at least every 2 years or so, and I have a great time. That's my history. It is also, spoiler alert, not my favorite Sergio Leone movie, but
Oh, stop. Ugh, cringe, Jacob. Well, I first got into the Western in around 2012 for 2 main reasons. One, Django Unchained came out, And I saw it in the theaters, and that was one of the first movies I saw in the theaters where I just thought, this is fucking amazing. Like, I like a lot of movies, but Django Unchained, I saw that and I thought, what is going on? It was my first Tarantino movie. So it's definitely a hell of a first Tarantino movie to go through because it is one of the bloodiest. What?
And as you have this little distraction, I will make mention that Tarantino is a good person to bring up with this film because he is a huge proponent of The Good, the Bad, the Ugly. In fact, he has gone on record saying it is the best directed film of all time.
Yeah. But I watched that at the same time I was playing a little game called Red Dead Redemption. And both those things, they're both Westerns. And I had seen Westerns before, but those two things are both very uniquely spaghetti inspired. To the point where it, like, The Good and the Bad and the Ugly is just so infused with every element of those two. I was going to say two films, one's a video game. Doesn't matter. So then a few years later, I picked up this DVD that they still sell at Target, which I find odd. The trilogy of movies.
Mm-hmm.
And I watched all three, and I remember thinking the first two were pretty good. And the third one just blew me away. And it's only it's same with Jacob. It's only gotten better every time I've seen it. To the point where this most recent time when I finished it, I literally thought I could watch it again right now. It's quite possibly the best movie ever made. I'll say it that much. One of them. It's not my favorite movie ever. It's not even my favorite Western, but it is just, it's iconic is the only word I think that can properly describe it.
When I first heard that Quentin Tarantino made the statement, it's the best directed movie of all time, I was like, what the fuck is he talking about? Has he watched other movies? And then
Quentin Tarantino watched movies?
What did I know? I still know nothing. But the
fake film thing.
I don't necessarily agree 100%, but I don't disagree with that sentiment. So I'm very much in the same boat as Chandler. What is your history?
Yeah, it's funny that both you guys mentioned that it seems to get better with every watch, because that is exactly my history with the film. I think, man, I've watched a lot of Westerns, and growing up, I really only would watch American stuff. And I feel like it's so funny, Jake, that you bring up that your dad showed you this movie, because this feels like such a dad movie, or like people that might have seen it in the movie theaters really just want to show it to the next generation and their kids. And I've come to the conclusion, this is slightly off topic, but the next time it's available to see in a theater, I'm going for it, because, and we'll get into this later, but it's a long film, and I think you need to pay attention to it to get the full breadth of how great it is. And I can just imagine that in a movie theater, this thing plays. Like there are movies that are better experienced alone, and there are movies that are better experienced in an audience. And I can only imagine what The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is like.
I have seen quite a few movies in a movie theater because I've been blessed with the loft, and I unfortunately have not been able to see The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, but I have seen Once Upon a Time in the West, and that was an experience to have in a theater.
Hey,
and I can only imagine.
You've seen The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly in a theater.
I have.
With me and Nick.
Shit, we have. We have.
And it was forgettable.
I watch so many movies every day. Yeah, you got to give me. To be fair, this as the moment Chandler said, "You have seen me in theater," I was like, "Wait a second, I have." The fuck am I talking about?
Not at the loft, though.
I just need the memory jogged a little bit. Yes, I haven't been in Phoenix for a few years now, so I kind of forget about everything that happened there.
Yes.
Yeah.
But
needless to say, I would like to watch it for a second time in a movie theater.
And Chandler, I also experienced Quentin Tarantino for the first time when watching Django. Another off-topic comment, but it was the first movie I remember not wanting to go to the movies for some reason. I just didn't want that. I wanted to do something else. And within the first scene where Christoph Waltz comes up with the dentist and just ices those two guys, I was hooked.
Ugh.
If we're sharing our Django stories now, apparently, I will share that it was a movie I really wanted to see in theaters, and neither of my parents. It's Tarantino is not their thing, particularly. I've spoken before about my mother's aversion to violence on this podcast. So, and we're talking like low key levels of violence. So Tarantino levels are just
Could she handle Jackie Brown?
Yeah. Yes, probably. But I had to watch Lonely Me, had to watch Django Unchained later on. I remember very specifically, my dad and I were looking at the newspaper to find a movie to watch. And I said, how about we go watch Django? And he was like, no, I don't want to do that. I remember this. I think we were on a trip. This has nothing to do with Good, the Bad, the Ugly, but just reminiscing.
But yeah, I probably first saw The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and actually paid attention to it, early on in high school. Before that, if my dad was watching it, I'd probably like barely even give it notice. But the first time I watched it, I remember thinking, man, this is one long movie. And that was about it. My cinematic brain was all mushy and newborn at that moment. So I don't know what I was thinking. But upon seeing the other two Man with No Name movies, I found it odd that the first film, I believe, is right around 95 minutes runtime. Then for a few dollars more is just about at 2 hours, I think.
Yeah.
And every single film gets exponentially larger, both in scope and in runtime. And I remember thinking to myself, probably the beginning of college when I watched them back to back to back, how much better a Fistful of Dollars was. And thinking about it now, it seems crazy.
It's hard to fuck up that source material.
Yeah, exactly. And that was the first time I watched them back to back to back. And it almost seemed like there wasn't enough story happening in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And Chandler, you brought up that the movie is super, super dense. And now I would agree with you, yes. But in terms of like structure and what happens in bullet points, I think if you were a like screenplay 101 writing professor and you're trying to tell your students what they need to write, and you need to have 3-act structure, and just remove the fat, trim the fat, and just make it as streamlined as possible, they would have read the script for The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly and given it like a D.
No, I was thinking the exact same thing.
Because
that's what I do as a job.
Slightly
yeah,
with
you
that
do?
sentiment.
Yeah, I
I
read like 7 or 8 screenplays a week. And this is one of those things that if I got this on my desk, I would see, okay, this is 180 pages. That's not going to work. But it's one of those things that on paper, this should not work. And I think technically it is messy. Well, it's not even all that messy because all of it flows well. It's just that it goes everywhere, but it does it with so much confidence that I don't even mind.
I could not say for certain, because I obviously don't have a copy of The Good and the Bad and the Ugly script in front of me. I would be surprised if the script was longer than 120 pages. Probably. I don't know where you're coming up with this long script from. It is
I'm just going off the basic rule of a minute a page.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yes, but
I know
it is incredibly
Leone
short
likes
on
to take
dialogue.
his time.
If Sergio Leone wrote out every single shot in this, or like described the beats
it'd be a book
of the scenes, it would be immensely long. It would be like the longest prose script ever written.
But speaking of the script, like this is a very interesting film to talk about the script wise, because I don't think a lot of people don't understand what goes into the making of a spaghetti Western.
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of the film is not actually filmed in English. A lot of the actors are speaking their own native language, and there's very
Which is so
interesting things
funny
to be
to me.
talking about, like the actual filmmaking and how that informs that. But script-wise, it's there's not all that much dialogue. Like most scenes are 30% dialogue and 60% things are happening. But the interesting thing about like the actual dialogue that is coming through on our final end is that Sergio Leone didn't ever refer to a script on set. Never, just didn't have a script. Like why would you need one? He, unlike like might be the opposite of Orson Welles, where Orson Welles like diagrams every single last thing in the film, including like the costume design. He knows it. Leone is just like, just do it, do something. This looks cool. And the script, then they have to redub the entire thing. Like the whole thing has to be, none of the audio was recorded on set. And so there is a second, maybe a third stage of writing. Like most films, you're rewriting it in the editing process. But this is an extra level on that, because there is actually a writer, like a translator, because someone had to go in, look at the dialogue that the Spanish speakers were saying, and you can't translate that because it won't necessarily, the lip movement isn't going to necessarily line up. So this translator has to go in and say, okay, here's this line of dialogue in Spanish. What can I change that to in English where it works with their vocal movements and works with what the original content of the script was, which just is wild to me. So I would be very curious to see like a translation of the original script that Leone wrote.
It rarely matches, though. I thought it was super obvious.
It is, but they do try.
It was. Well, is that a thing that bothered you when you first saw it?
No. I don't think I ever cared. I've never been a nitpicker. So
well, as a kid, my favorite thing in the world, I watched so many goddamn Godzilla movies. So at that point, I was just used to it.
Yeah, I think I've been used to it for a while.
And it's much more. It's yeah, like you said, they tried. It's much. Very rarely does it like blatantly not match. Whereas in Godzilla, it's like they're playing a separate movie. That's the charm, though.
See, I feel like sometimes they'll just be talking, and it's almost like the person that's on set stopped their dialogue, but they continue doing dialogue for like 5 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you'd call it like the one mark against the movie, but its sound design is very, very shoddy. And for some reason, it doesn't matter that much in the movie watching process, because the music is so damn good that you don't care about the sound effects.
See, quite frankly, I think the sound design is shoddy, but I also think it is expertly done in certain scenes, like where the sound like really matters in some scenes. We haven't actually got into any of the specifics in the film. Interesting. We're this far.
So if we're going to talk sound design,
but yes, but I mean, to go back to your original point. So in that sense about the script, like I think it is a lot tighter script. It is a lot tighter than you are giving it credit for. But at the same time, I would also agree that it is, if you handed it to a professor, they'd be like, what the fuck is this? Because you have the first third of the movie is almost a separate thing where it's like Tuco versus Blondie and they're doing their own thing. And sure, you have Angel Eyes doing his thing kind of in the background.
He disappears for like a good hour of this movie.
And then you have the middle section of the film, which is kind of about the treasure. They get together and it's kind of meandering. And then you have this whole sequence with a Civil War battle. Like, where does this come from?
That's like its own movie entirely. It's just a movie within a movie.
I used to have problems with the Civil War battle. And then every time that is probably
so
part of the film that gets better for me.
I think when I was younger, I was just wondering like why they had so many people that looked like they were from Spain and Italy wearing Confederate uniforms.
Now, okay, I'm not a history buff. Was the Civil War even happening to this extent out in the American West?
It was.
Yes and no. It was happening. It probably was not happening this much.
They
Yeah, because this looked like Antietam.
They did base the river battle on something that happened in New Mexico.
In New Mexico.
I don't know if it was to the scale, like Jake was saying, but
from what I heard on the behind the scenes features, it wasn't like the scale might not have been, but a lot of the stuff in the film, Leone did research and at least is based around things.
Yeah,
definitely the camps, the prisoner camps. That stuff happened, and that was in New Mexico.
Fun fact, Civil War fact that I would never bring up in this podcast, and it's even tangentially related to this discussion, but the southern and most western battle of the Civil War happened outside of Tucson on like the road from Phoenix to Tucson and by Picacho Peak. I don't know if either of you are familiar with Picacho Peak.
Yeah.
And it was right there. It wasn't big,
neat.
It wasn't anything, but there's like a plaque, and it was the mountain opposite of Picacho Peak is Mount Union, and it's a completely irrelevant mountain, but they named it that because it was a battle in the Civil War that happened.
Quick swing back to the sound design, because like I agree that it's shoddy in some places. So many different scenes where you'll have like this big sound effect that just cuts like a millisecond too early, and it's jarring. But like you said, Jacob, it works really well when it needs to, because like my favorite scene in this movie, I think, is Tuco fucking around with the guns.
him making his perfect pistol.
Yeah.
Which in the direction for that scene, Eli Wallach recounted that he knew nothing about guns and just did things. That's
fun.
Yes.
It's fun because it makes no sense. But you know, you hear like the rolling click of the chamber being like twisted, and then all the metal clinging together, and then just great editing of just the guy looking down.
It's
and
very
I wanted
tactile.
to say this because I don't know, I've always thought this, but it wasn't until my most recent rewatch that I thought this. This is like one of my favorite comedic performances ever. He's hilarious in this movie.
If I were to make any like general statements about The Good and the Bad, the Ugly, it is the film is advertised as a Clint Eastwood production, but it is most certainly Eli Wallach's movie.
Yeah,
Tuco is the centerpiece upon which this film stands.
It's funny you bring that up, because I believe that was Clint Eastwood's fear when accepting the role for the third movie, is that he was going to get upstaged. I actually have it written down what he received. He made out like a bandit, no pun intended. So for the film, for shooting the film and acting as Blondie, he got $250,000.
Amazing.
A new Ferrari, and 10% of the U.S. box office takeaway.
That's
my God.
That's a good deal.
That is a great
That's a pretty
deal.
good deal. That is a great deal.
That might be the best trade deal in the history of film, maybe ever.
Well,
believe me.
You know, obviously the title it emphasizes from the title alone the importance of these three characters. And I think it's the huge reason why this movie works is you have the goodest good, the baddest bad, and the ugliest ugly. I think all three of these characters are just about as perfect for their roles as possible. And that's, I think, why, especially the ending is so great.
And like, but I say it's Eli Wallach's movie, but at the same time, it is most certainly, it's a trio. Like the film, you know, you say like, yes, Lee Van Cleef does disappear for sections of the film, but he's very much a presence, and when he is there, the scenes
he's
are
like
great.
Yeah, he's like
it's like a detective.
J.K. Simmons in Whiplash. He's not there, but he's there. Very terrifying. Great intro to a villain. Fantastic.
Him being in this movie ruined High Noon and
High Noon ruined High Noon.
The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance for me, because if you've seen High Noon or Liberty Valance,
he's one of the.
You know that he's
like a
in
side
there,
bad guy.
Yeah, as like a henchman in the background. And the entire time while I'm watching those films, I'm just thinking about how badass he is in this, and when is he going to do something cool? Which he doesn't. He gets shot up in both.
No. Did you ever see The Big Combo?
No, I haven't seen The Big Combo.
That's like an old school noir, and it's the same thing. He's the bad guy's like henchman, his right hand man. Although the bad guy in that movie is just as good. But yeah,
this is partially why he is in this film, because Leone was working with a smaller budget, being a Italian filmmaker, and I say smaller, like his budget got increasingly big with each film, and he was working with the biggest budget he ever had, and it still was pretty small. So I believe he approached Henry Fonda. Maybe that was for that was for the
Once Upon a Time
the
in
first
West.
one. No.
Oh,
No.
really?
Oh,
That was for the first one. He couldn't get the Henry Fonda for that, and I think he approached someone else for the Lee Van Cleef role. But
Gary Busey.
what is it for a few dollars more? No, the first one is for a fistful of dollars. That's it.
Yeah.
So Lee Van Cleef, he kind of discovered because he was cheap back in for that film, and then he kind of brought him forward for Good and the Bad and the Ugly because his character didn't die in a fistful of dollars. So he's just like, why not put him in here?
That is a diamond.
Did he even
in the
give a
rough
shit?
Find. That is amazing.
Well, even in those movies, like you said, Brenton, he's so distracting, not only because of his presence in this movie, he's got a very weird face.
He does. You like to stare at it.
Yeah.
And particularly his eyes and his cheekbones.
Yeah. He's a very mischievous looking man. But in those movies, like, he plays like the Muscle. And he's not super convincing as the Muscle because he has the face of a lead villain. So it works really well in this because, so much of this movie is just close-ups. So you can see every inch of his very interesting face. And he's also got he has this natural snarl to his voice too that just plays so well. He's one of my favorite villains in any movie because he's just so unrelentlessly bad. He's just a shit and doesn't try to hide it.
Cool, calm, collected, and just does terrible things.
To the point where he will commit a hit and murder somebody because the guy that he just murdered paid him. And in his brain, he uses that as justification to kill more.
Which
it's
I
great.
think is interesting. Like, you might, if we were going on like the D&D alignment chart here, I would say that Angel Eyes is a lawful evil character in that he seems to have a very a code of ethics for him as working that he follows. This code of ethics is terrible. It involves him killing people quite nonchalantly. But he does have if someone pays me, I always follow through.
Oddly enough, he reminds me a lot of Ralph Fiennes in Bruges.
That man literally died by his code. Yeah, he reminds me of Ray Fiennes in Bruges and Anton Chigurh.
Oh, yeah.
The most lawful of evils.
Yeah, the most. And it is also interesting because you mentioned how we have the goodest good, the ugliest ugly, and the baddest bad, which I also think is a bit of a misnomer. That is true. It is also not true at the same time, because I think if you really think about it, Tuco is probably the worst person in the film. Not in the film, but if you hear all the charges that have been levied at him,
yes.
Which one of my favorite things is they're reading out the charges, and then you cut to Lee Van Cleef, who has this conversation with the legless Confederate soldier. And in the background of the entire scene, they're still reading charges of a 3-minute dialogue scene. And then once that scene finishes, that's when the charges finish getting read.
And yet he'll never be more than $3,000.
Well, also, let's be honest. Clint Eastwood's not good either. Clint Eastwood, one of the first thing he does is leave Tuco to die. He's the least bad that makes him by mathematically he's good.
By comparison, he is good to the other.
I think that's the defining characteristic that separates Sergio Leone's West from everything that came prior, especially old golden Hollywood westerns, where there is a very specific black and white scheme to the characters, and Sergio Leone's westerns are just so dark and gritty and you get the sense that even after this film is over, these characters are going to be terrible people. Like, no one like really learns anything. They're just going to continue doing their thing, whatever that thing is.
Well, what did
You
we
could
learn?
say that
I guess we learned to do it again.
You could say that Clint Eastwood has an arc because at the beginning of the movie, he leaves Tuco to die in the desert. And here, I mean, he frees him with the last second, still leaves him.
That's
But he
true.
left him with gold. He didn't have to do that. Very, very minimal arc. Just a
Very, very
a
true.
pinch of compassion. But
Pinch
when
of-
I was saying earlier that this movie is just iconic, I mean it just that like so much of the iconography, the cinematography, the archetypes of characters, and especially the music are just so cemented in
Mhm.
just culture onward from that point that's why I think it's one of the best movies ever made.
Mhm.
I think you could, this film, despite the fact that I will claim another film is the best Western ever made. I think this film has the
I would
best
too.
This film has the best argument for the best Western ever made, the strongest argument, at least from a kind of objective point of view of not looking at the film itself, rather looking at its impact as the cornerstone of the Western genre in terms of like it is, you have this whole lineage of Westerns leading up to this, and it is still very much kind of based in a lot of classical ideas of the genre. And then at this point, it came out in a period where both the spaghetti Western and the actual Western were dying as a genre.
Mhm.
And you have this film, and then you kind of put a pin in this film, and then the rest we kind of turned into the revisionist Western after that, a great many years later. And a lot of that is based on the kind of development in The Good, the Bad, the Ugly. And then beyond that, it is perhaps one of the most iconic Westerns in terms of music, characters, scenes, you name it.
Off that note, can I tell you guys my top 5 Westerns in no particular
ahead.
order? Okay. Caveat, side note, very difficult to make this list. There are dozens of films that I wish I could fit onto this list, but alas, I could only fit 5. And I'm sure for you guys, you will have favorites that are not listed here. But
I'm making one real quick.
okay, great. In no particular order, here are my top 5. The Big Country, The Outlaw Josie Wales, The
Okay.
Searchers, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
Interesting.
I applaud you for having one of the most unique top Western lists, and I
Yeah,
love
that's,
this. What about, this is a entire kind of side tangent, but I think it is worthwhile. What about The Big Country inspires such love and admiration?
So that is, if I nailed down one that is my favorite Western, it probably would be The Big Country. And I think for me, one, the directing and the tone is just fun. And I love it, start to finish. It's just a good time vibes movie. But I think it goes against a lot of stereotypes in the Western genre. Because you have this character who doesn't want to fight, and that's like the moral of the story. When normally the climax in all Westerns is that the good guy has a gunfight with the bad guy. In The Big Country, they subvert that, and no one really wins in the end, except for those that didn't fight. I just love Gregory Peck.
Okay, good. I just wanted to hear that
Okay.
explanation. It's a good movie.
I'm just gonna go real quick. Django Unchained, My Darling Clementine, The Wild Bunch, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and Unforgiven. I was tempted to put Rio Bravo, but I'm gonna give it a little bit because I actually really like.
I
Rio
haven't.
Bravo.
I haven't told Brenton. Sorry, this is a bit of news. Brenton, do you remember when I was helping you move out, and I was looking for a movie to watch while I was waiting, and I watched Put on Rio Bravo. because I said it was painfully boring and I didn't like it, and I wanted to give it a second shot, and I had nothing better to do. And so I watched it that time. That was my second time watching it, and I don't think I got all the way through. But I said to myself, this is still boring. This is not a good movie. I don't like Rio Bravo. And then very recently, it was on the BFI list, and I rewatched it. And I think I've eaten my words completely on that because I love Rio Bravo now.
It's similar to my relationship with The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, in which every single time I watch it, I find something new that I just love. And it continually gets better with every single rewatch.
I will not explain too much here because I explained before on the podcast. I think Rio Bravo is a film where, like Ted Turner wanted to colorize movies.
Yeah.
I think Rio Bravo is a film that works better if you actually put it in black and white.
And he did it. He put it in black and white.
I do. I have a file copy of it in black and white, but that is neither here nor there. My
Does
five
it look
favorite
fantastic?
Westerns. It looks.
There's
reasons, but five favorite Westerns. My Darling Clementine, The Wild Bunch, Good, the Bad, the Ugly, Once Upon a Time in the West, and something.
No Country for
Insert-
Old Men.
Insert
I have
Western here.
all of the movies you guys listed on my almost made it list.
Fuck.
So I completely understand. I also put on here High Noon, Stagecoach, and The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance.
I agree with those,
possible
except
contenders.
for. I agree with those, except for High Noon. High Noon's boring
Okay.
as hell. But have you seen Slow West?
I have seen Slow West.
Slow West is awesome, and
Slow West is
most people
great.
think that one's boring as hell too.
Yes,
but I
that's
love
very
Slow
true.
West.
I'm going to be
That's right
I'm gonna be
underneath.
unique and put my fifth favorite Western of all time as the 2012 True Grit.
Oh,
So,
great.
That's
Okay, that
2010. That is a great
2010, sure. Guess
that made my top 10 films of 2010. No,
Was number
just the
one The Social
2000s.
Network?
I forget when we made that.
Whoa!
We made that list.
2010s. You mean?
When we made the list of like the top 10 movies of the decade.
yes. So it would be of the 2010s.
Yes. And that I made one note here. I haven't seen the movie Greed.
Which one?
So the 1924
Fuck that movie.
Eric Fun. what is
It's
it?
not a
sucks.
Western. It's Western adjacent.
Okay.
It
Like
is
the
Western,
last-
Jason.
The last fourth is Western adjacent.
I hear so much about it, but I still just
Do you
have
hear about
refused
it
to
at
watch
USC Film School?
That people brought it up, yeah.
What do they say? Do they say good things?
They say it often comes up when they wish that they could have seen the full cut.
Yes, I agree.
I don't.
Maybe.
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 What I have, Chandler and I are both very harsh on that film. We did not care for it.
But
At least what is left.
Does
now-
the
now that
general
we've-
count?
I think it could, yeah.
All right, continue. I was just
Now that we all said those top 5 westerns of ours, I think it's also safe to say that the most iconic out of all of them is probably The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
I agree.
Chandler, as you were saying, that iconography in this movie is prevalent throughout any western that's ever going to be made from now on. Any western that was made prior to when it came out, and any western that is made afterwards. The amount of times I've seen or heard, rather, the Ennio Morricone, like 5-second theme from this movie. They just always pull from it.
We
The
we couldn't
Western-
help but discuss The Good and the Bad, the Ugly just a little bit the other night. But something that Chandler and I shared is that the score is amazing, obviously. But there are 3 tracks in the score. It's the opening, the titular, The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, the theme, and the Ecstasy of Gold, and the trio. which
also
is
the Civil War song, "Death of a Soldier," is also really good.
I mean, there's more, obviously. Every track is great, but those are like the 3 really iconic. Like a lot of people just know them, even if they haven't seen the movie. And I like to joke that like Ennio Morricone dropped too many bangers in this this score. Like he needed to save some for other movies, because this is a dense soundtrack of just epic proportions, and quite possibly one of the best.
I think I made that like movie meme chart like last week, and I put this just on a whim as the best score ever made. But the more and more I think about it, it kind of is. Because not only are the songs so iconic, but the actual like production, the music itself, it's so bizarre, especially given the context. Just the sounds, the guitar, the weird yodely vocals, the harmonica, the everything. It's such a weird array of sounds that has become sort of synonymous with the Western. But it's really hard to just really contextualize just how different that sounded. Like when you watch a bunch of John Ford Westerns, it's a lot of orchestral type stuff, some harmonica in the lower beat scenes, but this stuff is just, even by today's standards, it's so inventive but still like unmistakably Western that it's just only gets better as time goes on. And this is like, it's like a once in a lifetime score, but this guy kept going with banger after banger. The Thing, Cinema Paradiso, what's the Hateful Eight, so many great jams that he did peak with.
The only soundtrack that of a Western that even comes close for me is ironically yet another Ennio Morricone score, which a few years later he yet again pulled out of his ass just an amazing score for Once Upon a Time in the West, which also has some bangers. It's not quite as iconic, but it is just as good technically of a score.
But that in Once Upon a Time, it's also very much linked with the imagery. I mean, you have a guy who literally just plays a harmonica. So,
and that's
props to him.
Yes. But this is perhaps a discussion for a few films down the list.
And I do think, just really quick, going off of Ennio Morricone, I'm glad that his music has gotten a resurgence in Quentin Tarantino films, because I don't think people gave him enough credit for how great his soundtracks are and scores.
Is
he still kicking, by the way? Is he still alive?
No, he died recently.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's right.
It's interesting. There are like the Italians for some reason just make great scores, because there's Ennio Morricone, who is one of the greatest movie scores of all time, and then there is Nino Rota, who any like avant-garde Italian film, you might have known him from The Godfather, little film. I don't know. It might be on the BFI list. I don't know. But he is another great Italian score. Not as good probably as Ennio Morricone, who is just, I mean, how could you beat him? He's just too iconic.
Exactly. No.
He is
the only one that comes close.
John Williams of
he truly is
the international cinema.
I was thinking about like, oh, go ahead.
Mine was going to probably move on to like pre-production of this. The movie. So
well, before you move on to pre-production, just one last mention of Ennio Morricone. I thought we were going to continue on, so I was going to save it. But
it has to do with him.
Okay, good, great.
Yeah. But I'll let Chandler talk if he wanted to finish off.
Oh, it's okay. I was just gonna I was gonna use it to talk about how great Howard Shore is with the Lord of the Rings. Very irrelevant.
Let's just keep going. Let's just keep saying, no, you should talk. What were you gonna say? No, how about you? You had something. You look like you were gonna say. All right, Brenton, continue.
With how great Ennio Morricone's score is, you get the sense that Sergio Leone knew what he had, because they actually composed the music before they shot the film.
That's epic.
And based.
And going back to the sound design, the reason they had to dub everything over was because they would play the music on set so that Sergio Leone could compose his shots and his timing and pace to the music.
Which
honestly,
yeah, you go.
I was gonna say that is that is a fantastic approach that I wish more people did.
Mm-hmm.
Because it is a distinctly Italian approach, where like in American cinema, it's just like, whoa, what the fuck are you doing? We're recording here. Sound. Like you will get yelled off of a set if you make sound, if you're on a soundstage and you're doing something in the background. But again, I was watching the bonus features, and Clint Eastwood was like, yeah, there's some people playing tennis off camera, and there was some two Italians yelling at each other. And so it was just like, it sounded like there was chaos on set. And in all of this, I just imagine Sergio Leone, this like Zen Italian, just blaring Ennio Morricone's music and like, I want camera here. This is where it goes. And this like goes back to how I mentioned, like he doesn't have the script on set. Just the man just was like, the camera goes here. This is what we are doing. It's all in my head.
Does this make The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly the greatest music video ever made as well?
No.
Another director who did this, Federico Fellini, was infamous for, he just played music on set and did everything in post. So Italians.
It would he'd later do it on Once Upon a Time in the West, and to equally as effective results, I'd say, if not more.
He probably, I wonder like what he did with Once Upon a Time in America. Where did he like try to film and Robert De Niro was like, we don't do that here. We record sound on set.
I also have for us some quotes that Leone made after his falling out with with Clint Eastwood over this
These
movie.
are great. Yes.
But we can get to that after finishing talking about the actual production, which we haven't even got into. We haven't even got into the movie itself. Who wants to start?
I don't know.
Where does it start? This is one of the low key, one of my favorite opening shots of all time. Like, I don't think about it all that much in terms of like, oh, this is a great opening shot. But there's something about it that every time I see it, I'm like, wow, I'm really like, that's just a lot of fun. And it kind of sets the fun kind of zany directing style that Leone has. And then it's just like this wide shot of desert landscape. And then the guy like leans into frame and it suddenly becomes a super close up. And it's super simple, but like no one ever starts a film like that. No, it's just great. And from there it gets better.
All of the frames in this movie seem so painterly. Like you can see everything. Everything's normally in focus. And they really took effort in composing every single shot. He cared so much about the visuals. And it shows.
Yeah.
To the detriment of everything else almost.
Yeah, it's one of those movies you can play with the sound off. I'm always just amazed at the scope of it, because they do the small intimate scenes very well for as action oriented as this movie is, but I always forget just how fucking expansive it gets to the Civil War part. And it's almost like the movie thinks that way too, because it starts with just, you know, Tuco and Blondie walking towards the camera, and then it just pans right around the corners. There's this whole ass fucking battlefield going on. That part always blows my mind. But it's just another thing that I commend this film for is pioneering the look of sweaty Westerners.
Yes.
Because I much prefer disgusting looking Westerns to the John Ford super clean kind.
This is part of what I was trying to get at when I was saying like this is kind of like a watershed moment that you know, the revisionist Westerns later on, but not only just the revisionist Westerns, but just the straight Westerns later on took more of like this gritty approach to creating a West that looked lived in rather than the kind of make-believe fantasy Western that preceded.
I don't think there's many people that would watch the spaghetti Westerns that Sergio Leone made and tell themselves, you know what? I would love to live in this time frame. It seems like it was a fun time to live.
Terrible. It's disgusting. It's the smelliest thing.
It looks like everyone has the worst BO. ever. And like there's parts where particularly Blondie and Tuco are like in the river and they're just like walking around setting up TNT, and then they get out, and the only thing I can think about before they blow up the bridge is how nasty their clothes must be. And, like how uncomfortable they are going to be, like when they're sleeping, and then for the rest of the movie when they're just walking around.
They don't change. One great scene, speaking of hygiene, Tuco's bath scene. And he's like looking at the counter and he's like, oh, what's this? Let's sprinkle a little this on me. Like he doesn't give a fuck.
So much. Cleaning the inside of his ear. And one part that always just makes me uncomfortable in a good way is when Tuco tries to kill Blondie in the desert. Well, first of all, when Tuco gets just left for dead and then he goes into the gun shop, his lips are so disgustingly chapped.
I want to say, like, every time I watch this film, it might be some of the best makeup I've ever seen. Like, there might be better, but it's just so believable.
For that one, yes. When Clint Eastwood is in the desert, that one doesn't look as believable. When he's got like the scabby face and
Still
stuff
good,
like that. But yeah, still good. But that right there is just
I think it's difficult, because Clint Eastwood is such a good-looking guy. He's very attractive.
He's hot as hell in this movie.
Yeah. So like trying to doll him up to be all wrinkly and sunburnt is a much tougher job than doing that to Eli Wallach.
Well, yeah.
Which, I mean, he looks so realistic. You're right on the money with that.
Terrifying. Bloody, moist. Speaking of which, okay, so I know that there exists multiple versions of this movie. And I'm curious because I'm starting to wonder if this is a real scene or if this is some fever dream. I watched the theatrical cut. That's the cut I usually watch. My Blu-ray has the extended edition on a separate
44?
disc. That's okay. My cut is the 2 hour 44. Okay. The extended edition, I think I've seen the extended edition before because there's one scene in particular that is burned into my mind. I can't tell if it's real. Is there a scene where Tuco is just eating chicken in a cave?
Oh,
and then a bunch of Mexicans come through the ceiling?
Yeah. So
that does exist?
It exists. He randomly, leaving from creating his gun, he finds a chicken, goes into a cave and just starts plucking the chicken, talking about how he's going to get so much money if only he had help. And his friends are eavesdropping. And those friends quickly get disposed of by Blondie.
Because they're the ones who are in the hotel.
Now I'm confused. Mm-hmm. I think I've only ever seen the extended edition then.
Oh, really?
Which, yeah, because I've always seen that scene. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, well, if I've seen the extended edition, what the fuck could you edit out of that? That's one of my favorite scenes. Well, actually, no, it's not one of my favorite scenes. It's one of the best lines of the film is Tuco says, if you work for a living, why do you kill yourself working? Which I think is just a good life motto to kind of live your life by. And it comes from Tuco, who's just disgusting. But
base Tuco.
But yeah, it is kind of a strange scene.
I have a list of the deleted scenes. If you'd like me to go through them.
I'm very curious now.
Okay, so during his search for Bill Carson, Angel Eyes stumbles upon an embattled Confederate outpost after a massive artillery bombardment. Once there, after witnessing the wretched condition of the survivors, he bribes a Confederate soldier for clues about Bill Carson. That's when he's giving the Confederate soldier some alcohol, lets him keep the bottle after the Confederate soldier tells him Bill Carson is probably in a prisoner of war camp. The next one after that is an extended desert torture scene with Tuco and Blondie. I think they just extended the walkout, the montage, and gave more runtime on the washing of the feet in the middle of the desert as Blondie takes a quote-unquote sunbath. And then there's the sequence with
Oh, I remember that. Okay.
Tuco and Blondie transporting Clint Eastwood to the Confederate camp. And then that's when he gets told to go to the Father Ramirez's monastery. There is Tuco and Blondie discussing their plans when departing on a wagon from the monastery. There is an extra scene of Blondie and Angel Eyes resting on a creek. When men appear, Blondie shoots one of them, and that's when you find out that Angel Eyes has a posse that he's hidden from Blondie. There is the sequence with Tuco, Blondie, and Captain Clinton that has been extended. So I believe it's when they are just walking through the armaments in the trenches, and he's just going on talking about being drunk and being a great leader if you're drunk. And then there's some additional footage added to the torture scene where Angel Eyes has the prisoners outside singing, and he's just having Tuco's ass beat. And then there is some missing footage from the Texican Pueblo hotel room where the Mexican woman is reconstruct. Oh, this is something that they never added in because it was lost. But I guess
what is this?
There's footage of the hotel hostess. The scene where Tuco, right after the chicken plucking scene, they're just about to assault his room. Right before that, they had footage of Blondie just hanging out in the room talking to the housemaid, which apparently the footage I'm reading right now was too messed up to show in terms of like deterioration.
Yeah. This is fascinating to me because that you've just listed off like a third of the movie right there.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, what? Yeah, I can see how you would take those out, but at the same time, it's interesting that the complete version of it is just the long version, and that just, despite being longer, it still has great pacing for me.
Mm-hmm.
See, a lot of that stuff I vaguely remember because I'm starting to think, Jacob, when we saw it in theaters, I think that had the extended edition.
Probably. It's the edition I have on Blu-ray.
Yeah.
I
have
think
it too. I have both.
It's harder to watch the theatrical version or harder to get your hands on it. I think
interesting.
The extended version is the one that's more available to people.
Right. That's what I have thought.
Well, I will say this about the theatrical edition. Aside from the scene that I talked about with Tuco and his merry men, that is the only scene that I feel like that needs to be in the theatrical cut.
Mm-hmm.
Because it goes from him with building his gun to him confronting Blondie in the hotel. And at that point I was watching it and, all these people, just these Mexican people that are working with Tuco show up. I'm like, where the hell did these people come from? And then that's when the wheels started turning. I started thinking, oh, that was in the other edition. Aside from that, I think everything else is fine to be cut.
I think there's one other that shouldn't be cut. It can be cut, but it shouldn't. And it's the scene with Angel Eyes in the rundown Confederate camp for two reasons. One, it makes the Confederate story, the Civil War storyline, a bit more continuous throughout the entire runtime. Two, it makes Angel Eyes not disappear for long stretches of the film. And
that's nice.
Further emphasizes the fact that he spends like the first half of the film, he's a detective looking for this money. And that really kind of emphasizes it. Starts the film looking for a clue, and each scene you find him, he finds a different clue that leads him to he infiltrates the Union prison camp, and there's a reason for that. Instead, I would imagine in the theatrical version, you're following Angel Eyes, and then he appears in the Union camp. Like,
that's when he disappears, or that's when he comes back. So many characters only exist within like one scene. he was like, if I had to pick a fourth main character, he always felt like the fourth one to me. Him and the injured Civil War general with his fucked up leg.
Not the
always
gun
felt-
shop owner who looks like a dog or something,
Yes. Italian Wilford
like a sad
Brimley.
puppy.
I'll watch next time I watch. I'll do extended.
It's interesting. Like if we were to go back to the summary, like how to summarize this film, you could say it is a ruthless killer is looking for a lost trove of Confederate money, and Blondie and Tuco stumble into this plot. Because like the first half of the film, this is one of the things I love about this movie. It's like I mentioned before, it's like 3 separate movies. And my favorite part of the film, even though I love all of it, is the opening hour of the film. The Tuco and Blondie, the adventures of Tuco and Blondie. They have their little scheme going on, and then they break off their friendship, and then it's like this cat and mouse game between Tuco and Blondie, and they're enemies, and then they find the carriage with Bill Carson, and suddenly, very like a turn of the dime, Tuco's like, oh no, stay alive, let me get you some water, and he's suddenly very, very conscientious towards Blondie, and I love that. And then there's like that's like the first kind of story segment of the film, and then there's the rest where you get more than an hour of the way through, and then finally they're on board with the let's find the treasure story that Angel Eyes has been on this entire time.
It doesn't feel inorganic, because really the treasure is not part of their world until like halfway through the movie. And it takes a while for them to get there, but once they're in it, it all feels like it's starting to come together, but it never feels disjointed in a way that, again, when you look at a script level, it would be so disjointed. You have essentially 2 or 3 different movies going on, but he just blends it together with the imagery and the music so well. And my favorite,
I think it also goes to the fact that the goal, like Tuco and Blondie's, their goal doesn't change. It's just their way of achieving it. Like they want money the entire film. It's just they found a shit ton of it in the second half. Fun fact: all the cannons that they use, those are real cannons, authentic. Vintage cannons that they're just firing off. Why not?
Well, that's the thing, is that whole battle sequence. It essentially turns into a war movie, and it's a pretty fucking good war movie, even though this movie is not a war movie at all.
This is if you really think about it, the Good and the Bad, the Ugly to this day is essentially the quintessential Civil War film.
It's probably the best one,
like
best depiction of Civil War.
I can only think of Lincoln.
Gettysburg?
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Gettysburg exists. Yeah. When was Gettysburg released? 1993.
90 something.
So still, like this was like one of the only big depictions of the Civil War. I mean, there's little ones. There was, I think, like there's an old short film. Sergio Leone as a director. Until Peter Jackson arrived, he seemed like the embodiment of a little child doing things on film. Like that's what he feels like, and only to ever be outdone. And when Peter Jackson came along and had a play box of The Lord of the Rings and got to do fun things there. But this, like, especially the battle scene and all the stuff that went wrong, the safety issues there, Sergio Leone just seems like someone who's just like, let's just do it. Do it. Let's have fun. There's going to be soldiers there and there. We're going to have a play fight here. But if we wanted to talk just briefly about some of the safety issues, they blew up the bridge twice. The first time went terribly wrong. The army, the Spanish army, which is very interesting. I was thinking about this time around, is Spain was still a fascist dictatorship at this point.
Interesting
to think about under Franco, I think. And so they had the army rig it up, the whole bridge, and the camera people were going through all their checks, and they were saying, "Ready, ready, ready." And the army captain, who had been designated the honor of blowing up the bridge, was like, "Oh, ready? I'm ready." Boom. Well, this is also a reference to another film, The General, the famous silent film. Which
wait, quick question then. So was the first bridge better looking?
I don't know.
Because I always find it funny that this bridge is such a key strategic resource in this battle, and then when they finally like show it, it's a dumpy bridge made out of twigs, and I just find that so funny.
I mean, they actually built the bridge for this, and it looks.
It's
I mean,
rough.
going with the dirty Western vibe, this is just like someone like.
But it works. Because the general is like, the general seems so fed up with the idea that he has to guard this bridge. And then you see it's like made out of logs. It's not even worth like saving visually, but yeah, it's nice. I like it.
Just in like the sheer amount of practical effect explosions that they have happen just mere feet away from extras and key cast members has me cringe just a little bit. Particularly in the Civil War sequences, they have that one instance where the private comes up, tells the captain something, and then runs back, and in the middle of his run back to his post, there's just an explosion of cannonball and dirt next to him. Like literally a foot away from him, and you can see,
and he like jumps away.
Yeah,
scared.
You can see him jump, and I wonder if they just didn't tell the actor that was going to happen. I like to think that they had some kind of first AD on set telling everyone that this is what the shot is, and this is the special effect that's going to go off. But
there's some other examples of that in the recently abandoned town. Scene where Angel Eyes and Blondie have arrived at this place. They're hiding out, and then Blondie reunites with Tuco, and Angel Eyes sends his goons after them, which I think is comparatively not as memorable as the final gun showdown, but it is probably like the centerpiece gunfight of the film because it goes on for a little bit. Like there's some tension, and
I'd say it's meaningful in that it's like the first time Tuco and Blondie are seeing eye to eye and are truly teammates instead of just using each other for the sake of convenience.
And in that scene, particularly in the beginning, there's a great shot where like Tuco walks out onto the street and there's a cannon that obscures him, and it looks like it was like right in front of him. And there's other shots where like the cannon hits near the goons, and it's just great. It looks entirely unsafe, but
Eli Wallach almost died on this set multiple times.
Yes.
The first time was when a mechanic put down some like battery acid in a can next to him while he was on break eating lunch, and the can of acid was placed down right next to his soda can, and he accidentally picked up the wrong can and drank it. So he drank battery acid.
Wait, who did?
Eli Wallach.
Eli Wallach.
Oh.
There was another time where it was the scene where he needs to cut off the chain between him and the one Bruiser character on the railroad.
With the train.
And I love how Eli describes this as like Leone wanted me to be in that scene. He wanted the audience to know that I was right there with the train, that this was all happening for real.
And they actually hooked him up to a dummy and had him sit right next to a railroad while they drove a very real train past to cut the chain. But no one ever told him that the train had struts that stuck out every cart or so. And if he would have gotten up too early, he would have been decapitated on the spot.
He would have gotten hereditaried.
Yes. And then the third time was when It was during one of the hanging scenes. And the rope was fake. It's when they're pulling off their scams, and Clint Eastwood is just sharpshooting the hanging rope. But in this, the horse left too early. So in addition to getting choked out just for like a split second, they couldn't chase the horse in time because the crew members that were prepared to grab the horse when the shot was dead, after Clint Eastwood shoots the rope, the horse that Tuco is on runs off, and that's kind of how they get away with their scams. But in this, the horse actually got away, and Eli Wallach was on a bareback horse with his hands actually bound, and he couldn't do anything, and he almost fell off and broke his neck.
Fun times.
Yes.
I mentioned earlier, and I'm going to circle back to this, in that this is Tuco's film. And I would also like to put forward that Tuco is one of the best characters in cinema history. Like, I think you have to give Man with No Name to be a bit more iconic. I mean, how could you not? But it's pretty simple. Like
his job is easy.
Shtick is pretty easy. Like look calm, cool, collected. Don't say much.
I will say this. I've seen a lot of movies with Clint Eastwood in them. I think Sergio Leone uses Clint Eastwood better than anyone, including Clint Eastwood. Like, I don't really care for Dirty Harry. Unforgiven's also amazing, but that's more to do with the writing than anything. But Clint Eastwood in any other movie, he talks too much. Where in this movie, what he does best is look badass, and Sergio Leone knows how to make him look badass with the least amount of words possible.
So would you say that Sergio Leone typecasted Clint Eastwood as the guy that shouldn't talk?
Yes,
single-handedly.
And I don't think Clint Eastwood's a bad actor, but he's got such a distinct like voice that it kind of ruins a lot of dramatic scenes inherently. And while I do agree that this, Eli Wallach is just firing on all cylinders, and Clint Eastwood's job does look easy in comparison, he's still amazing he can do so much with just a look, a squint.
Yeah. A lot of his like acting in the film is just him looking, observing, watching, and reacting to Tuco in very calm, reserved, stoic ways. But he does have like some good, memorable one-liners. Like, his character is just a bunch of one-liners of like, characters get done talking and then he has a response. And one of my favorite lines in the film, I could quote a lot of lines from this movie. But one of my favorite jokes in the film, because this is a comedy and it's great, is back in that after the showdown in the blown up town, they get the note from Angel Eyes, and Tuco tries to read it, and then Clint Eastwood picks it up, and it's like the first thing he said in 10 minutes. And he's like, "See you soon, idiots." And then he hands it to Tuco. "It's for you." And then
my favorite joke,
cue Ennio Morricone's score and into the next scene.
My favorite joke in the movie is them trying to yell at what appears to be Confederate soldiers. And then, hey, it's not.
Those are the dustiest men in cinema history.
It's true. And I'm still not clear. Did they just happen to get dusty because it's the West, or did they put the dust on themselves specifically to trick people?
I always assumed it was just dusty in the West.
I think it was just dusty, because
I thought they was tricking.
Every time a cannonball hits, it's just going to throw up dirt.
Yeah.
And they're just like perpetually in a cloud of smoke.
And it's just because there's that one guy who sort of pats himself off, and I'm sure that's that's invented action just to reiterate to the audience that it's not real. But he always did it in such a way that made it look like he was taunting them, almost kind of going, "Gotcha, we're actually Union." But that's my favorite joke. That gets a laugh every time. Also, Tuco's best line is, when you want to shoot or whatever, when he kills the guy in the bathtub.
Shoot, don't talk.
Because that's a thing that still happens in movies. The monologue thing. Sergio Leone was saying that was dumb shit all the way back in the 60s.
This is a
What
movie
else?
where people like that have clever one-liners after they've won like a fight. And all I can think of is Marvel movies where I just cringe at half of the times they do it. Like this isn't appropriate for the character or the scene. And then here, this is a great example of working funny lines into characters where a lot of times Eli Wallach and Clint Eastwood didn't particularly think any of this was funny. And then later on, people were like, that gun line, the shoot, if you shoot, don't talk, that line, that's funny. And then you're like, well, so, okay, if you say so.
I will say an honorable mention for a funny moment is the pseudo visual gag when Blondie now has his new partner Shorty, and Shorty is about to get hung with the knowledge that Clint Eastwood is going to shoot him down, and then Clint Eastwood gets blindsided by Tuco, and he asks Tuco, "What about Shorty?" Tuco shakes his head no. Clint Eastwood looks at Shorty, looks at the horse get hit. Shorty starts to hang, and all he says is, "Sorry, Shorty," and he just gets up and then move on to the next scene. It's wonderful.
Oh, okay, so that's like a huge part, like you're saying, Jacob, that this is Tuco's movie, and I think his performance is the best because it's
wait.
You
were cutting out there for a little bit.
Oh yeah, I don't know what's going on with my computer. I think it's just heating up because we've been going at it a while.
You sound good now.
But yeah, he's doing a lot here, and it's really difficult to make a person this ugly, this evil, this shitty, this crude, just really entertaining. But he does it very well. Like he is the most despicable person on the planet because unlike Blondie, Angel Eyes, who's stoic and evil, he is just he has no moral code. He's kind of pathetic.
Which one of the most interesting scenes and one of the few scenes where you actually get like in-depth character work is of course the scene between Tuco and his brother, Father Ramirez.
Yeah.
And that's goes a long way. And I think that scene you can point to in particular to like say like this is Tuco's movie because he's the one that's getting a lot of like the heavy lifting character work done here.
That was going to be the scene that I point out. It really shows how tortured his character is. And it just like the smallest of hints to his backstory. But I think that scene is probably no longer than 3-4 minutes. And a 3-4 minute scene in a 3-hour movie sets up his entire character, and you empathize with him really, really well.
Yeah.
And I would say for the rest of the movie, you're totally with him.
Yeah, I'd say I'm with him for the entire film, just because I'm so invested in that performance. Even though,
especially when they're listing off how he's raped multiple people.
Well, some of my favorite ones are like deserting his wife and children. That's a crime. Also, or like theft of religious objects. Okay, that's
I love when he snarls
specific.
at the old woman too.
That's great. That's a great moment. And it's like, oh. And then one of my favorite, the wonderful old timey racism of this charge, raping a virgin of the white race.
And then statutory rape of a woman of the black race. Is that the line that they say right after that? Where they have to make the distinction for some reason?
Yes. My favorite Tucoism also, by the way, just real quick, is every time he sees a dead body, he does the little cross. He does the sign of the cross.
The thing about the film that this like Tuco in particular embodies this, but it goes with the other characters, is that they all seem to be like the film catches them in the middle of stuff of like the kind of Tuco literally crashes into the movie where he like jumps through the window and he has like a chicken drumstick and like he literally crashes, like things are in motion and the film gives you like this sense that like things have been happening all along. I love how like the film sprinkles in like Angel Eyes knows who they are. They're all friends. You don't know how they're related, but you know The film lets you know that they know each other from previous dealings, whatever those may be. And then, like at the end of the film, obviously Angel Eyes doesn't continue on because he's dead. But like you can imagine, like, what does Tuco do with all that money? Like he gets shot down at the end, and he yells at Clint Eastwood, but he's still there. How does he get the money away? What happens to Tuco after that? Where does Blondie go? Also, fun fact: this is a prequel to the other two Man with No Name films.
Are they even related?
Very, very loosely.
Other than Clint Eastwood is in it. They're not related, but they are.
I'm pretty sure Sergio Leone like vehemently states that they aren't. It was just the convenience of using the same actors over and over again.
Yeah,
was simple for him, so he just did it.
Well, the only reason I say
still
that,
interesting to note that this one does take place before the other two, timeline wise, in history.
Does it?
Yes, it does.
Yeah,
in
this is the
history.
Civil War.
The
The other two
are
after
the Civil War.
Okay. Yeah, because the only reason, like, in my mind, I could rationalize it as a literal trilogy, but the only way that I couldn't is because Lee Van Cleef's role in the second movie, he's almost like a good guy in the second movie, and that's like the only thing keeping it from being a trilogy in my head.
So, in the first movie, Clint Eastwood is referred to as John. In the second movie, Clint Eastwood is referred to as Minko. And in the third, he's obviously referred to as Blondie. In the second one, Lee Van Cleef is Colonel Douglas Mortimer. And in this movie, he is Angel Eyes. So I don't think there is a single character that is supposed to be playing the same character. But the fact that Clint Eastwood is playing, in terms of like acting, the same archetype in all three films, is the one through line that keeps these basically a trilogy.
Which is why it's called the Man with No Name trilogy, because it's Clint Eastwood going through the whole thing.
Quick nitpick. Clint Eastwood is not blonde.
No, he's
very dirty brown.
Yes, yeah, he's very
light,
a very light brown.
Which I mean, compared to Tuco and Angel Eyes, I guess that's light hair.
There are some shots where Angel Eyes is more blonde than Clint Eastwood is. I always find that funny because it's a good name, Blondie. I like it, but God, Dirty Blonde is even a stretch. He's a straight up brunette. But whatever. It's not Tuco's worst crime.
That's one of the offenses that you don't hear when Angel Eyes is talking to the guy without legs.
All it needed was a little throwaway line between him and his brother, where his brother talks about how rough it was that Tuco was raised colorblind.
Yeah,
exactly. Like, oh, okay. He thinks he's blonde. Give him even more depth. I wanted to say that like Tuco feels like an in-between of the good and the bad, but it's not. He's an ugly bad.
He's entirely irredeemable. It's just that you like him as a person.
Speaking
for some reason
of the continuity of names throughout the films, the three movies were released in the US within the span of a year. 12 months.
That's amazing.
After they were redubbed and everything. And I think it was United Artists. I could be wrong on that, but they didn't quite know how to market the film, and they didn't know how the American audience would take a spaghetti western, because they were like looked down upon incredibly. And so in the no, not for a few dollars more, but a fistful of dollars, in the original US cut of it, Sergio Leone is credited as Bob Robertson, and Ennio Morricone is credited as Dan Savio. And then they changed it after they saw all three. So I thought that was
I love that rationale.
That's like if
that Americans
like you go to see Parasite, and it's credited to like John Forster. You're like, who the hell is John Forster? And why is he making this like Korean crime drama thriller.
I love the rationale behind that, where the studios thought the people are going to watch this whole movie with Italians in it, but if they figured out an Italian directed it, that's the final
Exactly.
straw. Jesus Christ. Did these movies perform well? I know they were critically not so good on release, but did they at least do numbers?
People really enjoyed them. They got more and more audience box office with the release of every subsequent film. But like you said, the critics really heard it. And it's interesting because like you hear about movies that were critically panned when they came out, and then now they're all cult classics.
Yeah.
And I think this one might be the film that came out to like the most average middling reviews, but it's probably held to the highest standard out of all those films that were panned.
Yeah.
I'd put my money on this.
No, I agree.
As being the biggest difference.
Because like you said, the other ones turned into cult classics. This one went from middling to masterpiece.
Right.
Like it's on this list, you know, unlike other movies. But I read Roger Ebert's reviews because Roger Ebert reviewed it twice. He had the thing called Great Movies, which, you know, a movie will come out, he'll re-review it a few years down the line. If it's very, very good, it becomes a great movie, which is the highest honor he can give a movie. When this movie came out, he gave it like 2 out of 4 stars. And basically called it like an imitation of a Western. It's ugly, it's gross, it's got some fun moments, but it's just a very cruel movie. And then he reviewed it again in like the late 90s, early 2000s, and he gave it the great movie thing. And he's saying the same things. It's ugly and it's gross, but he's basically going, that's great. So there, you know, it's this idea that these weren't real Westerns, which that's sad. And I'm glad we've come around on it, but it's just interesting to think because, you know, I guess you could say that they're not because the American Westerns are so rooted in actual, you know, American people, American vistas, but the spirit of the Western, this is the most Western of Westerns ever made. And this was made by Italians in Spain.
But basing their work off of Japanese samurai
Yeah,
movies.
Exactly. Italian director making a movie in Spain based off of Japanese samurai.
That's what's great about the Western genre, though, is because I feel like you have the Golden Age Hollywood Westerns, which Akira Kurosawa saw. He said, I really like those. I'm going to make my own films based on those films. Then you have the Italian Westerns that saw Akira Kurosawa's films. They're like, I really like those. I'm going to make my films based off of those films. And then you have back to the American Westerns that have seen these spaghetti Westerns, and they say, I really like those films. I'm going to make my films based off of those films. It just goes in this.
Okay, hold on.
If you're like teaching a class on like how film influences different film genres, different film eras, international films influence others, that's like the perfect example. Like it's probably the clearest example of, because most of the time you see like, oh, here's one film that inspired one film that inspired this film. This is just like broad strokes, like genres of film have been influenced, and whole movements of filmmakers' works have been.
ABC leads back to A.
I don't think there's anything else quite like it.
Yeah.
No, like there's cross culture all the time, but this is like so obvious in a great way.
Wait, it's all Westerns? Always was.
I think this
every movie is a Western.
I don't want to say that this is not the most iconic Western, but I find Once Upon a Time in the West to have a different kind of iconicism for the West. Like they both deal kind of with separate but similar things. So I almost like I rope them together in like, if you want to experience the Western genre, just watch these 2 movies and you're done. I mean, obviously, please watch more. But like you've experienced the gamut, because like well, Good, the Bad, the Ugly is like classic adventure Western, and then Once Upon a Time in the West is like the death of the West in
terms. You gotta like, throw in a John Ford.
Yeah, I would say you gotta.
No, you don't.
Watch The Searchers.
John Ford, overrated. Get him out of here.
Hey, The Searchers is great. You like My Darling Clementine.
I think My Darling Clementine is a better film than The Searchers, but that's just me.
Might be right.
I actually like, I think about that so strongly. I will defend that position probably when we get to The Searchers.
Where's that on
I
the
also
list?
think there was
Maybe towards the top.
Yeah, it's too far at the top. There was a post, a thread on the Criterion subreddit a few weeks ago about the Sight and Sound list, this exact thing, which I think I might be an expert on. I don't know.
We're
getting
know
close
a good amount
when we're done with this podcast. But they're asking like, what do you think is gonna, like, what is gonna move down? What's gonna move up? What's gonna be added? And I was like, The Searchers, it's going down. Good and the bad.
My
the
three
ugly, I think it's
predictions:
gonna go up.
Searchers down, Parasite on the list, and Mank also on the list.
We're gonna have a whole episode before, because it's 2022 next year is the 10-year anniversary, and if you know the AFI, who did their like 1999 and the 2009 list of the best American movies, they did not do that list again for the third year in a row, third decade in a row.
They're probably just waiting for Mank to come out.
That's it. You got it. I have a hunch that the BFI will. I really do hope that they continue this for the third decade in a row. And if so, we will, of course, have an entire episode dedicated to our predictions.
That's
for that
funny because our list will be outdated. I don't care. Hey, it's fine.
Yeah, you guys will just have to restart.
Over again. Let's go.
We're gonna celebrate the ones that were kicked off that we agree with. Because if Greed's on it again, I quit.
Just when I finished one list, they pull me back in.
If I could put the Sopranos on. I do want to say this. The reason I love this movie more every time is because I genuinely think that the last 15 minutes is some of the greatest film ever made.
Yeah, I was gonna
like that scene.
Bring that up.
You were talking. Brenton was talking about a music video, like comparing this to a music video, and that in particular, like there's the Ecstasy of Gold, and there's the trio, and it's essentially just two scenes built around pieces of music.
From the moment when Clint Eastwood starts lighting off that cannon with his cigar, and Tuco hits his head on the slab. Some of the best movie making in the history of cinema.
I honestly think that final gunfight is like, it's probably my favorite scene ever.
Because the final gunfight is so good, I always gravitate and say to myself, that's the obvious answer. It clearly the best part of the film is Tuco running around looking for the great
Ecstasy of Gold is actually my favorite part. Just the cuts, how the music just starts blaring more and more and more, and he just gets frantic running through, and the lens gets longer and longer and longer.
Yeah,
and it's just like a stream of color behind him as he's just looking for the right name.
I believe it was mentioned in the behind the scenes stuff that Ennio Morricone, that Leone told him, I want the feeling that like the dead in these graves are laughing at these three people trying to get the gold. So that's where like the Ecstasy of Gold and then the trio kind of came from. And if you kind of listen to the music with that in mind, it's interesting. Like it's obviously it's very abstracted and not at all like that, but you can like get the sense of that, of like the horns blaring and boom, 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 boom.
Mm-hmm.
And it is
well, also, that scene is also great. And the only reason I say that the actual gunfight is better is because I feel like the Ecstasy of Gold is just a god tier song that is doing a majority of the heavy lifting. Not that obviously the filmmaking isn't, but it's like the final. Oh, go ahead. We can continue talking about this.
Going on the Ecstasy of Gold. So if the trio and the opening theme are the most iconic songs from this, the Ecstasy of Gold is the one with the best legs in terms of like how much it's reused like a bunch of bands use this song.
Metallica opens every concert
yeah,
with this song.
They love this song. It is amazing.
And I mean, a great
yeah,
name for a song, for anything, really. Yeah. The Ecstasy of Gold. Like that's very evocative just to begin with. And like you think of if you were to tell someone who've never seen this film, like what would a song called The Ecstasy of Gold be like? And
it sums it up.
You give them like 10 years to think about it.
Before showing
and then you show them the song, you're like, and then they'd be like, that's even better. I don't know what you'd
hear it and be like, can we think of a better name?
Oh no, you couldn't.
By the way, I'm sending this to you, Jacob, and you can send it to Brenton too if you'd like. The reason that I became so obsessed with The Ecstasy of Gold, right around the time that Breaking Bad was ending, there's this guy who made like a hype video because it was right before the last season premiered. The last half of the last season premiered, and he did like a super cut of like the entire history of Breaking Bad set to The Ecstasy of Gold. And it's one of the greatest videos I've ever seen. So I'm sending it to Jacob. Send it to Brenton if you'd like. But yeah, that song, it's the best song in the movie. It's not the most, well, I mean, it is pretty also iconic as well. But that song just gives me chills. And paired with that imagery, as simple as it is, it really sets the stage for what I think is the greatest scene of all time.
And has Quentin Tarantino ever dropped Ecstasy of Gold into any of his films?
No.
I think that's smart of him because it's too recognizable. He's only going for the songs that are less known.
He's probably too respectful of the film.
Yeah.
Okay, here's the thing with Tarantino. Tarantino steals a lot. He's very open about this.
Yes.
But Tarantino loves film so much that even he knows when it's time to not steal. I was listening to an interview he's doing about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And writing the whole song, when he was writing the movie, one song that he wanted more than anything in the movie was California Dreamin' by the Mamas and the Papas, which most famously is used to beautiful degrees in Chungking Express, which he's a big fan of. And he said, as perfect as that song is, and as much as I wanted it in the movie, I would never use it because Chungking Express owns that song.
Wow.
I'm sure he feels the same way because he thinks this is the best movie ever made. This is one of the best songs ever made. To put it in anything else would just be a laughably poor attempt because you're never going to be able to replicate the power it has in this specific scene.
Right.
The other thing with Tarantino is that he primarily steals from bad movies or B movies or things that you aren't familiar with. Like I've seen a lot of movies, but the movies I see are the ones that are very they're broadcasted. They're on lists and everything. And then when I look at like a compilation of references that Tarantino has made, I'm like, what the fuck are these movies? Where does he find them? And I'm astounded by what he knows and what he has seen.
He's seen too many fucking movies. I love movies and way too many fucking movies.
Yeah, but I think this is his favorite film. I'm pretty sure. Did you say that, Chandler? Do we know if
I've heard him say it's his favorite film.
Okay.
Jacob's saying it's the best directed film, but I thought he said it was his favorite.
For sure.
Okay. I know that this is his favorite scene in any movie, at least. But
wait, the Ecstasy of Gold one or the Trio one?
Technically,
the
it's all
trio.
one scene.
Yeah, technically, I clump them
It's a
together
sequence.
personally. But he's
me
talking about
too.
the gunfight.
But I'm saying that
The gunfight
specific
is
part.
his-
We're splitting hairs at this point.
Yeah. But we're not here to talk about Quentin Tarantino. We're here to talk about Sergio Leone and the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I think the break that they take from the Ecstasy of Gold up to like one of the best visual and musical cues collaboration of like the zoom in punch in on the Arch Stanton grave. That's like some of the best punchy edit ever. And then they have a perfect amount of time with no music and just people talking or digging. And then the build up and the suspense of the trio is fantastic. I mean, what can you say
if
about
I were
it?
to
No words can describe it.
Get a feeling for this whole thing, it's like if I were to say like, okay, Ecstasy of Gold, great. The trio, great. Obviously, if we want to get even more specific, it is the moment from when the Blondie is like, I'm gonna write it the down on the stone and put it in the center of the circle. And he goes to put it in the center of the circle and he sets it down. And from there, it really starts going. And then there's like this. They take like 90 seconds to just get like
Position.
to the positions. And it's, you see Blondie in the center of the circle and Angel Eyes is there, and then out of frame comes Tuco, and they kind of like Tuco and Angel Eyes have this like little sidestep thing, and the music is blaring as they're just slowly dancing to like this their three positions around the circle, and then finally, after a while, you finally cut to what you've been waiting for the entire film, which is the wide shot of the three of them in the circle. And all I can think of right now, like to describe this, is from Uncut Gems when Adam Sandler looks up at the camera like, holy shit, I'm gonna come. It's just like, you're waiting the entire film. The music is so good, and finally they're here. And then you get to the meat of like cutting in between all of them.
And okay, so this scene, obviously great, but the reason I think it's the best scene ever made is because I feel like this scene, more than any scene in movie history, makes full use of what makes film so powerful. Because again, it's one of those things, on paper, it's just them looking at each other. But it's the combination of the gradually increasing closeness of the camera, the gradually increasing editing, where they're looking, what it cuts to after where they're looking, how the music factors into the rhythm of the cut. It's getting maximum amount of tension and suspense and just cinematic power out of the simplest thing. And when you just like look at the ratio of what you're seeing to what you're feeling, I think that is just exactly what movies should be. And it's every time it blows my mind even more.
Yeah.
To reminisce about our days at ASU, there's a professor at ASU, Andres Torres Vives, who has a very interesting idea of what film is. And the farther away I get from film school at ASU, the more I think he's right about things. That I was like, when I was a student, I was like, don't tell me what to do. But one of the things he was like, he was very against music in film. And
can I wait before you say something?
Yes.
I just want to say, I think Andres Torres Vives is like a professor that should be teaching lower class cinematic classes in addition to what he's already teaching, because I think we got him too late in the program. And like the more you think back about it, like he's one of the better professors. He's like one of the best ones.
He needs to be whipping the freshmen and sophomores into shape, so that by the time that they're ready to do their capstone, they don't make the dumb decisions that, you're so set in your ways, you're getting into capstone, and then you finally get Andres Torres Vives, and he's like, that's not a good short film script. And then you haven't like had someone really push back on you in that way, and so you're like,
and then you're just
screw you. I'm going to make some edits to make you happy, like to make this relationship work, but that I'm keeping this dumb idea.
Anyway, you were talking about music and film.
Yes. So he showed us a few films in class. One of them, he showed us Wasp, Andrea Arnold. He showed us A Woman Under the Influence, John Cassavetes, and some other ones. But the overriding idea behind a lot of these was that there was no music, that these scenes worked based on their editing and their acting. And I mean, particularly like A Woman Under the Influence is just acting 101 kind of stuff there with Gina Rollins. And he was someone who very much emphasized, at least from a student filmmaker perspective, the manipulation that music does to a scene. And I think I would very much agree with him that you, as a up and coming filmmaker, you should try as much as possible to make your scenes work and your film work without music. And like, I'm thinking of the more and more I'm watching kind of smaller films, the more I find like, wow, there was no music in that movie, and I was still engaged with it. And that's something really to be said. Like, I was just watching the 3 films by Luis Buñuel. There's no music in any of those. They are still fascinating films to watch. A lot of Lee Chang-dong does use music, but a lot of his movies don't, are just primarily dialogue character scenes. Anyway, I think to go with Chandler's point, to bring this back, is Torres has a point. And I think a lot of filmmakers do rely on music as a crutch. But to discount music just in general is to leave off a significant element of the filmmaking arsenal. And the beauty of filmmaking is that it incorporates the other arts into it. And then it builds upon that with things like editing and things like being able to use close-ups, which, you know, you have acting in the theater, obviously, but you don't have real close, intimate acting like you do in film. And like Chandler said, I'm not necessarily going to disagree with that sentiment, that this is one of the best. I'm not going to call it the best scene ever, but it is most certainly a great demonstration of how music is a fundamental part of cinema, and an important one that can be used to amazing effect when the editing and the acting and the story build up to a moment like this. There's my rant.
I agree. I don't necessarily agree with the professor's stance on music, but in this scenario, I'm trying to imagine this scene without music.
Well, it would still.
That's
work.
a lesson
weird.
in editing.
It still work. It's just not the greatest scene ever made.
Yeah,
and I think, like John Sturges, another great Western director, had like a similar opinion. Not with Professor Torres Vivas, but like you'd be idiotic to not use music. He said, I think during one of his many commentaries on his movies, he said, like, when I'm making a movie, I'm God. And in my movies, I like music. There you go. Music's in the movie. And he would say, like, I'm here to manipulate and give you a feeling. And having music in there and, like, knowing when to use it. He probably would be against just shoving it in there if it's not working.
Which I think a lot of movies nowadays tend to do. Like, audiences have been maybe too accustomed to just music. And at a lot of movies nowadays, it's just kind of background noise at some point, which is unfortunate.
But I mean, like, can you think of any of these spaghetti westerns taking out Ennio Morricone's score? Like, that just seems blasphemous. It's like taking out John Williams from any Steven Spielberg movie.
Yeah, but again, like you said in the pre-production, the music was recorded beforehand, and I think that's why it works so well. Is because he composed the film around the music. So taking away the music, it would just rob it of everything because it was built around this already. And that's why I really like this approach, because again, I agree with Jacob that there's a lot of movies that just throw it in. They see what they have afterwards. And, you know, obviously you can make music to accompany those certain scenes, but that approach for this movie in particular is why I think it's so well directed, because he knows everything he wants to do. He makes it, and the editing is not about making the movie work. It's about making it as best as it can be. So taking out the music, especially for that last scene, it would still work. But yeah, that is what makes it the greatest scene of all time.
Right.
Well, if we were to hypothetically, if we were to take the music out of the film, I would still say that, like, forget Ennio Morricone's score for a second. I would say that this is one of the most musical films in terms of the filmmaking itself. Like, and this is partially a symptom of being filmed with that music in mind, clearly, but like the editing itself has a rhythm to it that is discernible and recognizable in a way that most films aren't. Like most films, you are editing and you are making good decisions for each particular edit. Like we're having a conversation here. This is the correct moment to edit from this character to this character.
Mhm.
And that's fine. Nothing wrong with that. But this film, there's like this overarching structure to the way that Leone edits his things, of going from wide shots to close-ups and back and forth and building up tension using that. And there's like little like staccato, to use a musical term, of like lots of little quick edits followed by long periods of like long shots, quick edits, and there's a flow to it all that you could say, like watching a scene, there is a rhythm and tempo to the scene that is independent of the music, which makes the music on top of that work even better because it's working together. They're kind of fitting like a hand in a glove.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Whereas
They are completely in tandem with each other.
I don't know what kind of metaphor I would use for
But
other kind of music
I
that doesn't.
think
Gun in a holster.
yes. Boom. It's weird because like obviously some like when you go to see some movies like Parasite, it is so versatile. That movie is great on so many facets, and I think this movie and like spaghetti westerns, or at least Sergio Leone's spaghetti westerns, are like so embedded in the Western genre and being like a genre film and having all the cliches that you'd think of a genre film, that given to someone else that's just like a competent director, no one is talking about these movies now. But I think Sergio Leone looked at the stories that he wanted to tell and said, okay, the movies here, if I direct them like normal directors would, if that is a term that I can use, they're not going to be memorable. But I'm going to lean 100% into like crafting these visuals and just making it the most stylistic movie anyone's ever seen, that it is going to reinvent the genre. And like you've said multiple times in this podcast, Jake, become a watershed movie. So I can't imagine this movie without the music at all, just based on that fact.
There are some directors where you could say there's this director and then there's everyone else. And I think, I mean, it's kind of odd to say that there are multiple directors where you could say that for, because obviously it precludes, you can't have multiple blanket statements like that are contradictory. Anyway, point is, like, you could say there's Leone and there's everyone else, because I don't think anyone directs a movie quite like Leone in any capacity, and even Tarantino. But no. I think, I mean, another one clearly would be like Ozu, Yasujiro Ozu. There's Ozu, and then there is everyone else in the world. No one directs a film quite like him. So these are like some of these. I mean, obviously, there are directors like Orson Welles. There are people who direct like Orson Welles, but not as good as Orson Welles.
Yeah. I mean, there's
David
definitely
Lynch.
People that have tried to do what Sergio Leone's done, I think. We just don't really know about him because no one could do it like him.
Yeah, Tarantino's the closest.
I wanted to ask, like, how many movies did he direct? Because I think it's only
Not
a
a lot.
handful. Was it a lot?
Yeah. No, not a lot.
Oh, okay.
There was these three, Once Upon a Time in the West. There was one before this trilogy.
So
Then
based
he
on
did
that,
Once Upon a Time in America. He only did like
Because,
7
like,
or 8.
all
There's another
his
film from
movies
in
are
between-
considered masterpieces. I wanted to ask, is he the Italian Stanley Kubrick?
No.
No. He's only got 2 really, really good movies.
I
I
think
think.
the other ones are great.
There's a lot of people like Once Upon a Time in America. I think it's pretty good. It's not as good. He directed 2 other films. One of note, interesting title, Duck, You Sucker. Also
That's
known
a
as
great
A Fistful of
spaghetti
Dynamite and Once Upon a Time, The Revolution.
That's badass. That's badass.
Does
Just
he just
aping.
love Once Upon a Time?
He just loves like taking things from other of his movies and like reusing them. Oh, it could be this too.
Yeah.
He likes history, I guess.
What else
Oh,
is there
well,
to say
yes.
about this movie?
Oh, he did a one. Yes, it was a Once Upon a Time trilogy. He did. So,
He
Once Upon a
did,
Time in the
he
West, Once Upon a Time the Revolution, Once Upon a Time in America.
did. Yeah.
I remember reading that before, and this is not the first time I heard that.
Yeah, I don't even know what else to say. I feel like we've had a very in-depth discussion here.
Well, okay. So Leone, because he was kind of a Kubrickian, David Fincher-esque director, he was so specific on what he wanted, and it was so grueling having to get like all these camera angles. Clint Eastwood, by the end of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, having done 2 other features with him, was so fed up he started calling him Yosemite Sam, because apparently Sergio Leone was quite obese. And whenever he wasn't like on a scene, he would just be golfing. He did not care past that because he was so sick of Sergio Leone's directing style. And Sergio Leone, when he was years later going to make Once Upon a Time in the West, he came to America to in person hand Clint Eastwood the script, and Clint Eastwood turned him down. And from that moment on, I don't think they talked much at all. And I do have some quotes from Sergio Leone in reference to Clint Eastwood. And this is the quotes that he used to clap back during the filming of Once Upon a Time in America. So here's what it said. It said, years later, Leone exacted his revenge upon Eastwood during the filming of Once Upon a Time in America, when he described Eastwood's ability as an actor as being like a block of marble or wax, inferior to the acting abilities of Robert De Niro, saying, quote, Eastwood moves like a sleepwalker between explosions and hails of bullets, and he was always the same, a block of marble. Bobby, first of all, is an actor. Clint, first of all, is a star. Bobby suffers, Clint yawns. Those are
He's
just
not
some
wrong.
tidbits. No, I mean,
No, this is a correct assessment. Maybe a little harsh, but
yeah, a little harsh. I think there's a little
some lingering
bit of,
animosity.
yes, just a tad. But yeah, apparently, I think Sergio Leone was an auteur, and working with auteurs can sometimes be grueling. But I don't know. You can't argue with results, and this and his other films are some of the greatest westerns ever made.
I have one more statement and then a final statement, summary of arguments of sorts. But a few lines that we've neglected. Some of my favorite moments of Tuco are very early in the film when he has been, quote unquote, captured by Blondie, and he is cursing him out as he's dragging him into town on the back of a horse, which I think was actually the first scene that Eli Wallach did on the set. And he says a great many things while on the back of that horse, and one of them is like, if you let me go now, you can still save yourself. Let me go and I'll pardon you. And then he gets thrown on the front porch of the sheriff's, and he's like, who the hell is that? One bastard goes in, another comes out. And then he says of Clint Eastwood, you know who you are? You want to know whose son you are? You don't know. I do. Everyone does. You're the son of 1,000 fathers, all bastards like you. And your mother, she's... And then Clint Eastwood like throws something at him. He's like, starts just gibberish after that. But it's great.
And then
Classic.
that carries on to the final lines of the film.
You bastard. Which, yeah, it's great.
You know what you
The
are?
last line.
You're a son of a... And then it cuts him off.
Now, just every time I watch the film, I don't know why, but this sticks out as the most interesting piece of acting in the entire film, of like emblematic of I don't know what, just of Tuco's performance
Yeah.
is when he goes in. This is before the bathtub scene. He goes into the bombed out hotel and he rings the bell. And the way he rings the bell just always sticks out to me. He just like gets it and like flings it around and then just like loses interest and sets it down. And it just seems to me like, talk about like a very simple action that has so much character in there. And it's probably just like a throwaway thing that Eli Wallach was just having fun yanking a bell about. And he's like, oh, there's no one here. And he just shows himself in. But every time I watch it, it's just like that. That's how Tuco rings a bell. That just is. That is Tuco.
Another thing about the acting of this film, I know we're dragging this out like Sergio Leone drags out his gunfights, but you can always tell like great acting by something as simple as like an actor walking across screen. If like their walk is so magnetic for your eyes, you could tell that like they've put so much thought into their character, or at least feeling into their performance. And I don't think there is a single actor in this film that doesn't have an amazing walk.
It's true.
They're all fantastic.
Which is why there's 90 seconds of walking before the last shooting.
Exactly.
Clint Eastwood in particular, because again, I said it before, Clint Eastwood in this movie is just devilishly handsome. And he's got such this like slender, chiseled, not even chiseled, he's just slender and lean, but the way that he like walks, it's the coolest walk on the planet.
You feel like you're gonna hurt yourself when you touch him. He's like made of stone.
Because he's lanky, but he has so much confidence.
Yeah.
And I love how the kind of iconic outfit of Clint Eastwood with the poncho is just in the last 20 minutes of the movie. Like he picks it up just for that last ending part and flicks it over his shoulder for the ending gun battle. And it's on the cover. Yeah. It's very iconic. And but for most of the film, he's wearing something else, which is also iconic and great costume design.
If you subscribe to the cinematic universe that is the Man with No Name trilogy, then I guess you would assume that this is when he got his iconic outfit that he wears in the other two films, right? And
he does have it in the other ones.
Mm-hmm. And it's the same
pattern.
Sheepskin coat thing?
Oh.
Yeah. That's a great little
fun behind the scenes production thing. Most films have multiples and multiples of costumes. There was only one costume, and Clint Eastwood took it home every night because he didn't want to lose it.
That's awesome.
He also picked out the jeans, like he just bought a pair of jeans for himself and the hat. So that's
he gave that poncho to a friend, actually.
And a restaurant's got it.
It says here, it was hanging in a Mexican restaurant in Carmel, California for years before I assume it's in some movie museum. Cinematic history museum somewhere.
Yeah.
So my final parting thoughts on The Good and the Bad and the Ugly. And we usually have this whole segment about, does this deserve to be on the BFI list? I think we've already answered that quite definitively. This is a resounding yes across the field. Which it's interesting though, because The Good and the Bad, the Ugly sticks out to me as a film that is, for the most part, devoid of deeper thematic significance. And not that there isn't any there, it's that when most people watch this film, it stands out to them as a epic Western adventure. And that's what it is. And the more I watch it, one of the things that sticks out to me that really gives it its legs and makes it a film that has I'm going to say emotional depth, maybe not intellectual depth. Like you're not getting the same kind of themes out of it as you might like The Grand Illusion or something else. But there's this kind of feeling that is built up in the film that has complexity to it. And what that is that this is The Good, the Bad, the Ugly is a film about death. When you think about it, it is a film that, despite its adventure, it is an adventure. It is about the frivolous escapades of three terrible people looking for money, backgrounded by death and sorrow and destruction. And in the background of every scene, something shitty is happening. And it is, when you listen to the soundtrack, there are two kinds of songs. There are the adventure sounds, which are the themes of our three main characters, and there's, the ending songs. But most of the songs in the middle part of the film are, I would say, mournful. They are mourning for the dead and the lost in the film. That there's clearly that sticks out is the one song that's played in the Civil War camp, but that's only one instance of a bunch of other in the film. And there's little moments throughout the film in the background where the Union soldiers are coming through town. They have a prisoner, they shoot him, he's dead, and they pack him into a coffin. And there's little moments throughout the entire film, and this kind of goes into why I think the Civil War battle near the end of the film is particularly thematically significant in the way that the film is making kind of the most subtle and kind of throwaway commentary on the frivolousness of wanting money, of devoting everything to money, and the lengths that these three people just kind of go to, and how in the end we're all dead. And that kind of the Civil War scene kind of emphasizes that, particularly the story of the captain, which I am bereaved was ever omitted from the film, because it's about getting something that truly means something, and how Blondie actually does something good for someone. That this is something was accomplished in this film that wasn't just killing people for money, and the frivolousness of that. And it clearly, the film ends in a graveyard. There is the imagery of death all over the film, and it is that juxtaposition. There's an adventure going on, and yet at the same time, war, destruction, and it's just interesting.
Well, and like I said,
that's why
there's a very minimal arc that Clint Eastwood has, and I almost feel like the thing Brenton said, the cannonball is what brings us into the final act, but I almost feel like it's that him
the kid
giving
soldier.
the kid soldier, giving him the coat, and that's where he gets the poncho. It's just he has that one little moment of realization, and now he's not going to leave Tuco to die. Now he's going to have a little bit of a heart. But I agree, it's a solid read.
The moral of the story is friendship.
It is. If you notice, this is one of my favorite things. Tuco, in the end, I think it's very important who everyone points their gun at in that final moment of the gunfight. And obviously Tuco's gun isn't loaded, so it doesn't matter, but it does matter. But Tuco aims at Angel Eyes. Mm-hmm. He doesn't aim at Blondie, which I think is important, because they have a friendship, and that is kind of a very small thing. You have to actually pause the film to really notice that he's not pointing it at Blondie. He's pointing it at Angel Eyes. And Angel Eyes, of course, is pointing it at Blondie, because he views Blondie as the bigger threat of the two.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know if this is going to end up on the podcast, because you already gave your closing statements. Well said, by the way. But that last moment, going back to what Chandler was saying about the unknown soldier that dies taking a last drag of the cigarette.
Yeah.
And then Tuco thinking that he is probably going to die with $100,000 at his feet. This most recent watch, I found myself almost tearing up, particularly during Tuco's moment where you can tell he's struggling and he's starting to choke up because he actually believes that this is going to be the end and this is how he dies. But yeah. If you just ended that movie right there, or if you're in a theater and the reel just ended and it cut off and they couldn't find the last reel, it would leave you with such a different taste in your mouth about everything that happened.
Yeah, that scene is always what really cements Eli Wallach's performance for me, because I'm always like, oh no, don't die, this murdering, conniving, raping asshole, don't die. I always feel sad.
I know I said that was my closing statement, but two things. If I were ever to make a criticism of the film, the two things were, one, why does Tuco take the shovel and like break open the bag of gold? Like, how are you going to carry that, you dumbass? Do you have other bags you're using? But this is neither here nor there because that happens after the film. And so it doesn't matter. The other thing is Tuco, being such an accomplished gunfighter, probably should have known that there were no bullets in his gun because the weight would have been significantly different.
He's blinded by the ecstasy of gold.
It's not like an actual criticism. It's just like you could nitpick there if you really wanted to, but I think in the film it does make clear that his attention is elsewhere for the scenes.
But if it happened the night before, I'm trying to wait. If they told each other at the bridge, if we're nitpicking, that we end this podcast after we've said that it's an amazing film by just trying to break it apart if we can, which we can't, of course. But if he knows, thinks that he knows where the gold is, what grave it's at, and where the graveyard is, they spend like a complete night doing nothing. Just like sleeping, waiting for everyone to move out. Part of me thinks that Tuco would probably escape in the middle of the night among like the hustle and bustle of all the army
I think it's probably
soldiers.
Indicative of their friendship.
That
That is cinematic bromance.
that is one tiny little thing that's always bothered me, that Tuco's like laying downward dog and he sleeps there all night.
His ass up. I always love that. It's funny.
It's kind of dumb, but again, I don't care. It's such a
he's so scared to lose his
unabashedly
life.
stylish movie that little things like that don't bother me.
Yeah, but I always thought like, he's so scared to lose his life in the battle and the explosion, the resulting of the explosion. He just like freezes up. He jumps down, sticks his ass in the air, freezes up.
Get a reboot.
That's how he spends the night. Like he just blanks out.
Yeah.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Great movie.
Great movie.